Hey guys, super quick message before we start the podcast. This is the How to Build a Guild That Doesn't Suck episode. So, to accompany this episode of the podcast, there's a whole web page on my website that is dedicated to this. It outlines everything we talked about, it breaks it down into easy to use format with all the links to the resources, week auras, anything else we covered for that segment of how to build a guild that doesn't suck. And in the next couple of days, I'm probably going to put up a Patreon episode as well that will go into more depth for little bits and pieces, like how to use the raid helper tool for your Discord and other bits and pieces that people have asked me for a little bit more information on as well. So yeah, if you like that, the link is in the description. This will help you out when you're following along for the How to Build a Guild That Doesn't Suck segment of the podcast. Enjoy. Welcome, guys, to Prepared episode 28, your weekly TBC breakdown. So we got a little bit of a special one this week. Guilds are collapsing. People are being homeless in WoW. So we're gonna do a special one. We're still gonna cover a little bit of the catch-up news, but then we're gonna get into how to run a guild that doesn't suck with Zirene and Snow. And then we're going to cover everything from basic officer assignments like raiding, comms, roster, loot systems. And then Zirene's going to run us through some raid leading type things because he does do raid leading and such. And then we're going to cover some things you got to watch for to make sure your guild doesn't fail as well. But yeah, welcome, guys. It's going to be a fun one. I think I built a whole page as well. I have a whole page on the website. So everything we're going to talk about, if I don't know, if, like sometimes people take notes, they send me the notes they took, but I do have a whole page on the website, and I'm gonna like spruce it up later. Right now, it's just like a rough list of notes for the things we're gonna cover today, but I have a whole page on the website that yeah, I'm gonna make fancy to kind of summarize everything we're gonna talk about today, so that people at least have a resource. But yeah, Zirene, how are you doing today? I hope you're feeling okay.
I'm doing well. Doing well. Yeah, yesterday was just a little bit weird for me. Like, you saw my stream where I was like, I don't remember how I described it. It was like mid streamer depression or whatever. Mid streamer life crisis. That was what it was. It's
WoW life crisis.
Yeah, it was mid WoW life crisis. We're like in phase 2. What people like? All I stream is my raids, and I don't like. I basically caught on to what people want to watch on my channel, which is they just want to watch me fucking raid. As soon as the raid, my viewership goes like this, goes like it like spikes really fast, and then as soon as my raid is done, boom, it like cuts in half, and then no matter what I do afterwards, actually that's not true. If I do Groll or Mag, people tune the fuck out. If I do PvP, people tune out. But it's like a lot of people are there just for the raids. And it's really funny too, because I've gotten big enough now that I get a lot of backseaters. And that's my favorite thing in the goddamn world is that the backseaters. Nothing like takes me from really happy and just like having a good time to just going in on somebody like a fucking Karen, like a backseater. Because it's like one of my first rules, on my channel is like, if I want help, I'll ask for it. And like, you can tell somebody just tuned into the channel. You can tell. It happened yesterday when I was tanking in TK, and the big robots that do like the overcharge that does like 14k damage and you can spell reflect it. I missed one spell reflect, and a guy goes, "Dude, you got to spell reflect that, bruh." And I was like, "I can tell you just tuned in." So I'd be really nice. Say something like that again, and I'm gonna permaban you. Okay, just read the rules, and we're good. And then I was like the thing is when people here's the thing is when people say something and they're trying to be helpful and they add bruh or something like that, it comes off as really snarky. Yeah. And if you, just a tip for anybody, if you want a back seat, never ever phrase it as a you got to do this or you should do this, right? And add anything else on it. If you're gonna backseat, if you can't help yourself, you can't help your little fucking fingers from typing on that keyboard and sending whatever the goddamn stupid little room temperature IQ thing you want to fucking send me, please phrase it as a question. Like, hey, I noticed you're not spell reflecting this. Is there a reason you're not doing that? Right? Or have you considered spell reflecting the overloads, right? If you phrase things as a question, it comes off as way less aggressive, and it also is a conversation instead of a command. So
until your chat catches on, and then they spam that.
Yeah. If you phrase things as a question, it's much friendlier. Also, fun fact: psychologists actually aren't allowed to give you real advice commands or things like that, because you can sue them because you're paying for the advice. They actually have to ask you questions and have you come to your own conclusions and be like, have you considered calling your father? Like, have you considered doing this? Right. And it's like, well, it's like, so why haven't you done it? Right. What are your reservations? Things like that. Do you think it's a good idea to do this? Right. They'll always phrase it as a question to lead you around to conclusions that they've made, but they want you to make yourself because you're the only person who can realize things. So just a little fun fact in a side tangent is that, in psychology, they actually can't or should not give you direct advice. They can lead you places with questions and have you come to your own conclusions. But
I can't wait till your next raid when half the chat is just asking you questions. It's like question mark after everything.
Yeah. Just stop being bad, bruh. I like that. Oh, fuck. Why didn't I think of that, dude? Fuck.
But yeah, man, the best is when they get the advice wrong as well. That's the best part, when the advice is wrong and they're telling you things. It happens so much in PvP, constantly, because people now have gotten, rogues are good enough to know that you have to stack wound poison in PvP, but they're not good enough to know that if an orc pops their ratio, it cancels out the wound poison. So then they see that the orc doesn't have wounds, and then they abuse you in chat because you don't have wounds out. And you have to calmly explain to them that orc ratio cancels wound poison.
No, I don't calmly explain it to them. I feed them to the fucking lions, dude. If somebody does something like that in my chat, we're gonna bring back. I have an emote that's I think it's Zirene Lion. It's a fucking lion because I used to have my subs are the Zy Legion, and it's based on the Roman Empire. If somebody's being a dick in chat, we feed them the fucking lions like the Christians. So, and that's what the banhammer is. And so if somebody gives advice, I'll be like, you really want to risk your neck on that. It's like, all right, you better fucking clean that thing off, make it nice and squeaky clean for your fucking date with the executioner. So I'll go back in the VOD, show it on stream, and be like, so you think I should have done this, huh? It's like, oh, you don't have this on. So somebody said your poisons wore off, my man. and I'm like, that's really what you want to say. It's really what you came in my chat and chose to say. Okay. Well, fucking goddamn, man, clean the fucking neck. And then you go to the VOD and you show them it's just fucking Wind Fury Totem because you don't use a main hand fucking poison when there's a shaman in your group. And they go, oh, I don't play melee. And I'm like, yeah, you also should shut the fuck up. So then they get permabanned. So, I am very brutal when it comes to those things. Because I feel like my chat is small enough and moves slow enough that every comment really matters. And if people start feeling like they can start saying stupid shit, I'm just going to breed a really stupid chat. And that's not what I want to do. So I don't want to foster that type of environment where dumbasses can get away with saying things instead of doing a little bit of work, you know? Here's the thing is people are like, oh, they're just trying to be helpful. And I'm like, yeah, they're trying to be helpful. Like your drunk uncle's trying to be helpful, you know? Like that kind of thing where they have no idea what they're fucking saying and they're really just being harmful. So if I allow somebody to go walk around being harmful, how does that reflect on me? So yeah, that's why I feed them to the fucking lions. They get the fuck out of here. But like I said, nothing makes me go from very, very pleasant streamer to, wrath of a thousand suns.
I mean, like that's sometimes the best stream content, though, on the topic of streaming. Sometimes that's the best stream content is when the streamer goes in on someone. I know, I love it when I'm sitting there in Channel's chat and he just goes in on someone.
Oh, yeah, people love it. People like watching somebody get fucking sacrificed. Dude, fucking, who was it? It was Disguised Toast. Disguised Toast used to do this thing back when he was on Twitch, I guess. I fucking have not been following him at all. Yeah. He used to do this thing where whenever he was like in a certain mood or something, I don't know if it was like he was just like lost the game or was in a certain mood or something like that, or if it was like, or if he just did it randomly, he would choose somebody completely at random in his chat to ban. Completely at random. Out of the thousands of people in his chat, you'd be like, okay, chat, it's time. And he just open up his viewer list, scroll all the way through, and then just stop randomly, pick someone, permaban. And I remember, and all chat would just be like hands up, like, oh shit, like, oh, Monka W, because you never knew if it was going to be you, but he had thousands and thousands of viewers. So, yep. It was actually really weird because I was like, how does this help him at all? But it was entertaining. Yeah. You know, it was entertaining, but people would get permabanned. But I don't know if he'd like unban them afterwards or something, right? But that's part of the show is just that. So
yeah, I mean, especially when you're playing certain games like WoW in particular, man. Like I think you saw this as well. Esfand's tweet where he tweeted asking people for like what should I do for my stream? What do you guys want to see? And like any mention of WoW was either don't play WoW or WoW was not mentioned. Like every mention of WoW was like don't do WoW. I don't want to see WoW.
Made a tweet that was like, hey, what do you guys want to see on my channel? And everybody was like, oh, I love your Madden stuff. Like I love when you help coaching. I like this. I like that. And everybody, it was unanimous. Everybody was just like, your WoW content isn't that good. Like, I was like, damn. Esfand said he's sad he can't play WoW. Yeah. Like, so here's the thing, right? Is I was like a mildly successful just chatting streamer, right? Like, I have no doubt that if I had just kept up with that ship, I'd probably be somewhere on that fucking goddamn leak list somewhere.
Yeah, right? I can't call you my numbers, Zirene. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a numberless, dude. I'm faceless. Actually, I never checked the list for me, so I don't even know. But it's like I would be somewhere on that list. Like I in my first month had 1,000 subscribers. It's really fucking easy when you're doing just chatting. I am committing like career Sudoku by streaming WoW, right? And pretty much everybody who's doing that is. Yeah. Even when I grow, it's like your subs don't grow, your viewer count grows, and you got to find a way to get sponsors and shit like that for that. Or you got to do Patreon like Snow, because a lot of people who see, here's the thing: is a lot of people who watch WoW, they're a different breed. You know, you guys aren't really like the mouth breathers who are going to throw money at people in just chatting. You're not like that. You're a little bit better than that. You understand that Twitch gets half of that money. So you go to Patreon and you sub to Snow there so that he gets the full money, right? Or a much larger percentage of it. So your buck goes further for what you want it to do, which is support him. Because let's be honest, Snow doesn't really have great emotes. So like subbing to him is not like a great idea. But you should just go to his Patreon and get way better benefits, like on his Discord and also early access to this podcast, where people ask me, when's the podcast come out? And I say, I don't fucking know. Go sub to Snow. And that's that's the truth, because you guys are much smarter. You want your money to go further. So it's actually interesting how there's a different audience that has different viewer habits based on genre of game, right? And it's interesting as well because, you know, I've been a viewer myself, so I've jumped between watching WoW to watching just chatting to watching League of Legends, and I myself feel even me wanting to participate in a stream in a different capacity based on what the streamer is streaming, right? Like I sub to a League streamer who basically uses only emotes that are like fucking inting emotes, or like, you know, just different versions of Pepega, but they're all fucking Janna or some shit, you know? And so it's like you participate in a different way, where it's like you want to like sub to Snow, but it's like, actually, I would rather like support him on Patreon. So it's really interesting how we have different buying or like purchasing habits. It's really fucking weird. So, but ultimately what I'm getting at is, you know, the WoW community, we're not rich, but we're just smart. So it's like we got to figure out a way.
We're really going down this midlife WoW crisis rabbit hole here.
We got to figure out a way, Snow, to milk the WoW viewers for the money that they're really smart about, which means we've got to be smarter than them, which means I shouldn't be talking about this on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. No, honestly, it's just really weird because like when people do just chatting, they feel more of a connection and stuff like that.
WoW's weird because like, here's the thing, even when I'm doing WoW content, because I know, especially with the metrics, I pay attention to the stats of how WoW category is doing, like where the average stream numbers are and all that stuff. And I look at it, and every time I think like, man, when I'm making a WoW video, I'm making something that I know will do well, because at this point I've been doing YouTube long enough that I know certain topics do well, certain videos that I do will do well, and I'm putting it out there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this will grow my Patreon by X many subscribers, probably it'll get this many views. And the whole time I'm still thinking at the back of my head is like, well, I should be doing something not in WoW as well though, because this is all coming to an end like in a year or two or something. Because if nothing else, the Twitch streamer leak showed like the incomes of all the WoW streamers. I actually was curious. I went in there and like had a look at all the WoW streamers, see like roughly where they stood, if it measured up to what I guessed that the top WoW streamers were making. And it was pretty much exactly what you expected. Like if you were full-time WoW streamer, you're just making like entry level pay basically. Like even if you're a big guy, and only like the absolute big guys like Peekaboo and such and Payo were actually making like very good money, and everyone else was like much lower.
I mean, if you think about it, it's just like any other fucking career, right? Like I saw that stuff and I was not shocked in the slightest, right? In fact, they make much more money than that, right? That is just their Twitch money. Yeah. That is just their Twitch income. That is most streamers make the majority of most top streamers make the majority of their money from things that are not Twitch subs, right? They make it from YouTube revenue combined with their subscription or their sponsorships, whether it's on their YouTube or on their Twitch, as well as just deals on top of that for anything, right? I can tell you straight up, like the amount of money that people pay for singular occasions of like a sponsorship deal, like the Raid Shadow Legends shit. Yeah, that stuff's going to be a large chunk of change for your month, right? Yeah, they make so much more money than that if they're playing things correctly, or they're playing it to maximize or min-max income. But yeah, I am not surprised in the slightest that the 0.01% of somebody in a field is making a ton of money. It's like, oh yeah, like that's like any other fucking career, right? Like any commentator makes like fuck ton of money if they're playing it right. Like my roommate definitely probably makes the most out of almost any commentator in the world right now in like the last like few months. Like you'd think of any actor, things like that. It's like, yeah, obviously, right? So I'm not surprised in the slightest. Also, you could literally take anybody's fucking like sub count and just multiply that by 4 or 3.5 and
2.5 for a lot of them.
Yeah, 2. So yeah, it's 2.5
if you're below like 1,000.
Yeah. What I've been told is you need 1,000 non-prime, non-gifted subs for 3 months, and then you can negotiate the deal to be 3.5. So that's what I've been told, which is very, very hard. Very, very hard.
Yeah. Especially in the WoW category. There's not many people that have more than 1,000 non-gifteds in the WoW category. It's like literally like 3 people maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, so fun times in the prospects of future WoW, guys. And that's what we've been up to. That's why Zirene's been having mid-streamer life crisis. But yeah, I'm always the same when I'm doing that stuff. I'm thinking, man, this is why like I always try to diversify, and I always think like, okay, I gotta get second YouTube up and running so I can be independent of WoW. Then if I do WoW, I don't do.
Yeah, you're fucking cheating on us. What the fuck? Snow.
You see me playing. Well, I'm not the person that's been playing Diablo on the side here. Okay.
Whoa. Let's not talk about me here. We're talking about you. I have been playing Diablo on the side. It has no end game. I don't know why I fucking played Diablo on the side. It has no fucking end game. It's like Diablo is literally you play the game to get better items, to play the game and do exactly what you were doing, just more efficiently. That's legitimately it. You're like, yes, I need more magic find so I can spend less time looking for the items off Mephisto that I want to trade for better items so I can spend less time on Mephisto. It's like, or make the time that I spend on him more efficient and get more drops from him, so therefore I can trade more things more frequently. It's like that's all it is there's no fucking end game. There's no parsing. There's nothing. It's just you just get better and better until you fucking burn out or die, and that's just life. It's just like life.
Fun, positive messages from the Prepared Podcast this week, guys.
Yeah, Diablo is a lot like life. It just gets harder and faster until you get to a point where you just get good enough that it just gets easier, and you keep doing things to make it easier in a cyclical loop. And it's just like life until you fucking pass out and die. It's exactly the same. It's just like old school video games, dude. You know, like was it Pong? Pong is just like life, dude. It just gets harder and faster until you die. That's it. There's no...
All right, guys, it's been a good episode. We'll see you guys next week.
No. Oh man. But that's why WoW is so great, because there's parsing. You can always do better every week. And and it's evolving. You don't know what's coming next. You don't know if rat's coming.
Every week throws you a new thing. You don't know if your guild's going to be there next week. Always a fun adventure.
You don't know what bug's going to stop you from killing Vaj this week. You know?
Will your belt be there? We don't know.
It still isn't half the time. I found out what does it. It's the tabard. So it's equipping a tabard or having your tabard load in a specific order will make your belt disappear. So if you take your tabard off and put it back on, sometimes it'll make your belt disappear. If you take your belt off and then put it back on, it will always appear. It's like,
See, Mango and Kiwi in the chat. See, he's saying that we did the depression at the start. See, we're learning. Now we do the depressing comments at the start of the podcast, and then you're not
exactly.
Yeah.
Get the depressing shit out of the way, because at least I have energy at the start of the podcast to be excitedly depressed, you know, instead of at the end where I'm like, yeah, okay, when are you doing this again?
The Zirene sigh as well. I think that was a point where I was editing one of the podcasts and we both sighed at the same time. I was like, oh my god, that's not good. That's not a good sign. We both sighed.
Hey man, in all seriousness though, I'm actually really excited for WoW, and I'm really excited for pretty much everything in general. I think it's one of those things where I was definitely having a bit of a, what the fuck am I doing type like moments, but in all honesty, I've always been taught and I've always learned that frustration precedes a breakthrough. Your lowest point is typically right before a surge of some kind in your action or in results. So you almost never have a smooth one-to-one of everything I do and invest is going to get me an immediate return. That's almost never how it works. Usually you're investing into a deficit and you're not getting anything back for a while. And then you're going to be like going through that questioning of like, why am I even doing this? What's the point, etc. And then if you keep pushing through, frustration usually precedes a breakthrough, and then that breakthrough happens, and then you'll realize all the results of which you've been, working towards.
Yeah, and so, I mean, like skills transfer as well. Like sometimes you don't know you're developing a skill, and then it helps you down the line and other stuff as well.
It's actually a really interesting thing because, like, just last little side thing, you don't always know what you're training for. When I first went to Riot to get hired as a commentator, it was a career that had never existed before, and I had been training my whole life for it because I had a degree in acting. My background was in psychology, which had analytical or data analysis in it, as well as just kind of just analysis of people in general and moods and tilt and sports and all of that. So those two things kind of came at a crossroad where it was acting as well as psychology and video games. So it's a career that involved all three of my favorite things that I had been moving and working towards in my life for a career that like never existed before when I was working on those things. So I don't know in like 2 years if something where it's like, hey, there's a WoW podcast that makes billions of dollars like pops up. So you never know. Like, but yeah, in all honesty though, you actually never know what's gonna.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, it's like
yeah. And sometimes you have to pave the way for your own stuff, right? Like that's a big thing.
Yeah. It's like I couldn't start my other YouTube channels if I didn't do the first one and learn like, oh, this is what you got to do. This is how the algorithm works and all that stuff. All the step by step.
You can actually start the podcast now. I think we could just make this a bonus feature. No.
Funny enough, that's actually how a lot of podcasts monetize. When I looked at how they monetize it, they do like pre-show stuff, and then they cut that pre-show into like kind of like a bonus podcast for people that subscribe. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting way to do it. I've seen some guys do it, but yeah. So on the WoW stuff, guys. This broke just before the podcast started, so Blizzard is adding back premade groups for BGs. Full premades again. We can finally do them again. Although I don't know how many people still need to do BGs at this point, but they're back. You can do full premades again, and they're gonna kind of make it the algorithm so that it favors that. Hopefully, if you're on a pre-made, you go against another pre-made, basically. But there's no guarantees. Basically, the last line on this is basically telling them there's no guarantee it's going to happen, but they're going to try to make the queue system queue you against another pre-made, preferably.
This is good for Alliance. The reason this is good for Alliance is Alliance players are used to having instant queues and teaming up and stuff like that when they really want to get something done. Otherwise, they, and here's the thing is, Alliance players are motivated to play together and not pug when they actually want to win, right? They're just like, hey, I was in an Eye of the Storm where like 4 people are AFK. Fuck this shit. Let's get a group together. And then they start actually like pre-mating, and it's usually a lot better. And the Horde, even though the Horde can play against Horde now and have Horde v Horde, when this was implemented earlier, Alliance were taking much more advantage of it because the Horde typically, even for like, especially AV, I guess now still had like longer queues, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the big thing is Horde are much more likely to solo queue because the fact that their queues are usually longer or they have more honor to grind right now than before because their queues were longer, right? So if you're a Horde player, you're more likely to be behind on honor than an Alliance player right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, Alliance players will typically like queue and mass and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So.
and you guys have the infrastructure as well. You guys have like the old AV discords and things that have been repurposed in some cases to help do other BGs and such. Whereas the Horde just don't have that because we didn't have that. Well, there was no point. Like our queues were too long.
Yeah, solo queuing AV is actually fucking disgustingly good honor on AV weekend. It is actually insane. I don't know why it exists. It's actually godly. It's crazy good. It was like 2K honor an hour. And the best way to do it was like, cause I was playing my paladin and I was like, damn, I really want to get my weapon and I want to start doing 5s and stuff like that because, I'm playing prot, so I'm playing holy. And I was like, how do I I can just do AV and I can just tank everything. And I was getting 2K honor an hour very, very quickly. And it was because all I had to do was put on Crusader Aura and get to the bottom of the map first. That was it. That was it. I just had to put on Crusader Aura, don't fucking stop for anything, and be the first person down south. Because if you cap the east and the west Frostwolf towers before the Horde start casting or start capping the Dunboldar ones, then you win.
Yeah.
Because typically you'll be able to actually cap those 2 towers before like Icewing Bunker even gets capped over. So it's actually like really interesting. But all you had to do is get south and hold those towers. Just cap them and make sure that you have like you can maybe queue with one other person. Give them Crusader Aura, and then you guys just rush down there. And the Horde never stop you. Horde never ever stop you.
Horde are busy arguing about that one alliance group that's being annoying in the bunker and people not staying. That's usually what the Horde seem to be arguing about.
Oh, I just mean like it's really like right away. Like in terms of like going down south, nobody stops you from going down south. I'm actually passing the Horde at Iceblood Graveyard, right? Like Crusader Aura is that fucking broken that I'm at Iceblood Graveyard seeing the Horde who came out of their base going the other way, right? And you're just passing each other and nobody stops you.
Yeah, the Horde seems to like at some point the Horde spirit got broken when Alliance started actually doing stuff or like clashing. For that period of time when Alliance had that clashing strategy, and then like Horde were like, oh no, wait, what's going on? We're actually losing AV, and then it's like Horde never responded, and then it just seems like Horde just went zombie mode and started just rushing as well. Except we don't seem to rush as well as Alliance do.
Yeah, I think you guys do well when you back cap. Even just a little. Like I feel like your rushes aren't as quick. Is the thing, and that's why I think is kind of the only problem. But yeah, I don't know if it's because your starting area is further back now, and that's like affected you guys. But I don't know. So
so BG's back, guys. Go enjoy the queues. I do need a cap mode order at some point, but I'm happy this is back. But did you see did you pay any attention to Season or Mastery launch at all, Zirene?
No, I didn't, because I just saw some people playing it, and leveling up a little bit faster from quests, but that
Yeah.
was it.
It's surprising the XP rate that they put in was actually like not crazy. It was legit just 25% more XP from quests, which wasn't really even that crazy. I thought when they said TBC rate, it'd be like TBC rate, but this is literally just a little bit more quest XP, it seems. And I was actually paying attention to the stats for the launch, and you can see WoW did have a surge. WoW did have a surge. This is actually is this? This is actually Peyo's stream, because I figured if there was one streamer to check for Classic Fresh, it had to be Peyo, because he's the Classic Fresh guy. He loves Classic Fresh. And so I checked to see like what sort of viewership bump he got and such, and there was a bump. There was a definite bump. But then the thing is, there was a bump and then immediate drop. And it's been the same for every day that he's done Classic Fresh, is that there's a big bump for people that tune in to see it. And then it seems like after that, they just kind of like drop off. And it goes back to like his same by the end of the stream. And I don't know why, whether it's just people who want to see it and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen this before, and then they're out again. But it doesn't seem to be having the same appeal. And even looking at just the WoW stats, I was looking at the last weeks of WoW stats and how WoW's been trending. There hasn't been any noticeable bump at all in the overall upgrade of WoW. In fact, WoW is down, I think, like 20%, 10 to 20% in viewership in the last week to 2 weeks. So that, yeah, it seems like it hasn't achieved anything. If nothing else, I kind of agree with Asmongold. He put out a video talking about it as well, where he pretty much just stated what we stated the previous podcast as well. He agrees in that it's pretty much just feels like Blizzard just wants fresh subs or wants more subs, and they're just doing this to get that influx of subs. And then if it dies, it dies, but they get the influx of subs in anyway. But yeah, that's just interesting notes on the stats of how it's going so far. We'll see how it goes, of course. But the devs haven't said, like, the devs basically came out and said that they're not going to do anything with the world buff situation. They kind of like want it to be that way. They want it to be where it's harder content. It seems to be their goal, is that they want the harder content, and world buffs are a big part of that. So no world buffs, basically, is what they're saying.
Yep, that's a nope from me. But I mean. And mostly because I just think world buffs should be just easier to obtain. I think they should be like, even if it's a fucking, I think I talked about this, where it's like, even if it's like a
NPC
6 hour
that gives it to you
thing,
for free or something,
yeah, that like legitimately gives it to you, and if you lose it, you lose it. And then because I just like the risk of dying in the raid and making that matter and making people have to perform. So that was well, I think the dip in like WoW viewership stuff, I think that's mostly just New World. Like, I think
New World 20%.
I think there's two factors to it. One, Phase 2 came out, people were watching a lot of streams to see what's going on, how people are doing, and then New World came out, and now people are playing that a little bit, and the New World viewership, here's the thing, right? You don't typically have people come from nowhere and then start watching Twitch just to watch New World, right? It's like that viewership has to come from somewhere else, and they usually will come from other MMORPGs and jump over from like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, and from WoW. So it created some new viewership. Like some people will watch, and who have never watched Twitch before, but typically those are just views that are going to come from somewhere else. So that's just kind of how it works. Yeah. So it has to come from somewhere. It's coming from WoW a little bit. So
yeah. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's interesting. The dev response, like someone in chat says, basically like said that a lot of the stuff we'll just figure it out as we go. A bit beyond that. They basically just said like, oh yeah, PvP, obviously that's not going to work with the fast system. If they want to introduce PvP phase 1, they're going to have to update some things, but they haven't said how they're going to change things. They literally just said, yeah, we'll probably have to change something. But yeah, no, they haven't really said anything. And honestly, yeah, I expect it to do well. Like, people took like what I said last week and said it as if I'm saying like it's not going to be popular at the start and such. I think it's going to be popular at the start for sure. Every new server is always popular at the start. The question will be more like 1 or 2 months down the line, will it still be popular? I don't think it'll be that popular by then. But time will tell. Time will tell for that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the thing, is like, what's the longevity of WoW? What's the longevity of the server or the game? It'll happen where people have like a surge in interest, right? In every expansion, that's usually where you'll see, at least now, the biggest spike. Whereas, before, back in like Vanilla and TBC and Wrath, where the peak in the game was not the beginning of the game, right? It was near the end of when that expansion was happening is when they saw the peak. But ever since then, it's typically been, oh, hey, everything's traveling everything's traveling downward and we have to course correct, right? So that's pretty much how it's been going. So
But yeah, guys, so we do have a huge amount of stuff to cover today for our main topic, which is how to run a guild that doesn't suck. I have a lot of stuff here. I made a whole page on the website with just summarizing the topics because it was just easier to go through it this way. So yeah, I thought we'd just go through the points. We can talk and see where we stand on these, but I guess we can just start. So the entire point of this is that, like, right now, there's a lot of guilds that are basically collapsing or on the verge of collapsing. There's a lot of people that are running into issues with their guilds, including one of my guilds on Felina. I raid on multiple tunes, and one of my guilds on Felina is running into these issues right now. And that's kind of what spurred this whole thing, is that I need to kind of step up and fix a lot of things going on with that guild to make sure it survives, because I'm a rogue and I'm not getting another raid if it fails. So
my glaives,
my glaives, man, my glaives. So I gotta step in and fix it. And yeah, so I thought if I'm gonna step in and fix this, we must as well talk about it as well, because it's a good topic and a lot of people are interested in this as well. So yeah, I thought first things first, what office security you need. So we'll start at just the basics. I think these are the basics that you need, at least from my point of view. I think you need like a raid lead. Like that's obvious. Like you need a raid lead. You always need someone doing assignments and like strats and things. So I know like a lot of guilds, they sometimes have class leads and things like this, which is kind of like optional. But what you do need is like like someone from the tanking section, someone from the healing section, and then someone who's helping to organize all of that together, so that at least like the tanks have the assignment set, the healers have assignment set, and then the DPS kind of like they're doing their own thing. Sometimes they have key roles, but a lot of the times they're just like zugzugging, as long as they know like certain fight mechanics and things. It's more important, I feel like, is to get the tank and healing assignments sorted, and then the DPS kind of falls in place after that.
Well, typically you want to have like a caster lead, and they'll be the person who like assists in people falling on the sword for like, not doing DPS in a fight to do like a different mechanic, right? Yeah. So the person who's like kiting phoenixes or, kiting striders, things like that. Typically you want to have like a caster lead. They might even be the warlock that tanks things, right? Like Leotheris and all that. So yeah, delegating responsibility is very, 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 very important. I've actually run a raid where I didn't delegate responsibility and became the single point of failure for it. And that is not good, because if anything happens to you, if you even need to take one raid off, nobody knows who's in charge of anything. That ended up being one guy said that he was loot master because he had done loot for me in the past. And then he ninja'd an item to somebody who was G-quitting to join his guild later. So who he knew. Basically, like, long and short of it is there was a guy in there who told me it was going to be like his last 2 weeks because he wanted to go like speed run in a different guild. And one of those last 2 weeks, I ended up in the hospital, and, I was like, can't make raid, none of that stuff. So they raided without me. And that one guy said that he had done loot for me in the past, and he gave Badge of the Swarm Guard to this warrior who was leaving the raid, who he knew was leaving the raid because he was joining his other guild to go speedrun, and gave it to him. And he's like, oh shit. So yeah, there's like a lot of shit that can happen there if you're the single point of failure, and you end up not being present. You think you can be present for everything, but like I said, like, being in the hospital, things like that pop up. You want to have good people in charge. Even not just to like delegate responsibility, but to also take aggro, because if you're the single point of failure and people will get mad at you for loot issues or anything like that, you end up with a lot of shit that you have to deal with instead of making 4 other people deal with a fourth of your shit each. Much more manageable, right? Instead of having 4 hours of conversations, each person has an hour worth of conversation, and that all gets done in a fucking hour, right? So it's much better to delegate responsibility, even if you feel like you can't you don't have good people. Like that was one of the things I was kind of like, I don't know anybody who I trust, or that if I put them in charge, here's something that also you need to be aware of is no matter who you put in charge, there will never be a unanimous, I like that person in charge from the rest of your raid. Ever, 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 ever. If you put one person in charge of casters, there's going to be like 4 casters who have an issue with that person, right? But you just need to know the reasons why you're making them be whatever class lead they are. And you need to stand by those, or not make that person a class lead because they don't actually live up to, what your standards are or what you're expecting. So no, you can't make everybody happy. That is not the point. You're not there to make everybody happy in the moment. You're there to overall run a smooth raid for everyone involved. So happiness does not mean that the raid is running smoothly. I have seen people who hate each other have a really fucking good raid, and I've had people who love each other have really shitty raids. So happiness does not equate to smoothness of raid, and that's what your job is there, is to just make things as smooth as possible. So like Snow said, assignments are very, very important. Get an assignment sheet. Make sure people are checking the assignment sheet, make it a religious thing for them to check it before raid. If you have to make any changes, always say something about it. Administrative stuff too is very, very big, and stuff that I don't like to dabble in. I fucking hate it. I hate managing guild banks. I hate doing all that shit. I'm more of like the raid leading type person. If you ever put me in charge of anything guild bankish, like that shit's never going to grow. I ain't that type of person. So that's where one of those situations where I don't want to, do that. It's not something that I'm even good at. So I definitely need to delegate responsibility there and like give it to somebody else. So picking good people to be in charge of things is very, very important. And you have to respect them and they have to respect you. They don't necessarily have to command the respect of everybody that they're above. It's you just have to trust the reasons that you put them in charge. So it's a very, very, very big thing. I actually cannot emphasize that enough, because that is a structure in which your entire raid is built off of.
Yeah. Like the main thing you did, I'd say that people want is just, you don't want to be in that situation where the entire like caster crew turns up one day and you're like, guys, what are we supposed to be doing here? Like, do we have assignments or what's going on? And then you spend like half of your raid now explaining to them like what you're supposed to be doing. You want to come to raid prepared with the assignment sheet already good to go. Like whoever's in charge of them has told them like, yeah, this is what you guys are doing. These are your assignments for this fight and such. As long as people have their roles, that's fine, I think. And on the admin stuff that Zirene said, yeah, admin officer is really important as well. Someone who, like, preferably not your raid lead, because your raid lead is always like really busy with raid leading stuff. So you want someone, they don't have to particularly be like super great at the game or anything. They just have to be really good at doing the admin stuff behind the scenes. So they're gonna have to handle your guild bank, your like signups, like posting signups every week, handle Discord, like loot issues. They're gonna be like the communications between the officers sometimes. Then they're also gonna have to set like sheet prios sometimes and roster changes and things like that. Basically, they need to be the guy that's jumping around and handling a lot of the little bits and pieces all over the place, because you don't want your raid lead or the guy who's doing assignments to also have to worry about, oh no, like, hey guys, this Discord isn't giving me access to this stuff, and people don't know what's going on with this one particular loot thing. So you need like an admin guy who's gonna kind of take care of all that stuff. And preferably, hopefully they're a little bit techie, because they will have to play around with Discord and tools and raid tools and things like that a little bit.
Yeah. That's one of the things is this is, I guess, ultimately what I want to get at is pick good people, right? You take your time picking the people to be in these positions, because it's much harder to be like, actually, I like this guy more in here. So like screen people, make sure that they're good, have a process that you first start getting people on board with, that everybody can get I guess like everybody can kind of get behind. So like pick good people and pick them well, and that's basically the entire like premise of this section. Is you really do need to delegate responsibility. You can't do it all yourself, and you will have weaknesses, and you need to pick people who will shore up those weaknesses and also enhance your strengths more and allow them to come out, because you don't have to focus on certain things.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things that made one of my early WoW guilds fail. It was that the officer crew is literally, they just kind of pick people that showed up every week, but not necessarily were good officers. And it led to a lot of issues down the line, where you had a lot of people who were not happy with the officers, because the officer also has to want to be an officer. You can't just put someone who like plays the class and you're like, oh, he does okay, he's the officer for these guys now, right? Like that happened with me in my first guild, where we had a rogue officer who legit didn't know anything about how to distribute loot properly and all this other stuff. So it came down to like he would just delegate it to other people and let everyone get away of doing everything they want. And when like 5 people are just deciding what to do with the loot, it just doesn't make everyone happy. You need one guy who's like putting his foot down. It's like, no, this is the way we're going to do it. This is how it's going to go. And hopefully that person in charge knows how loot is handled and such. Yeah. But,
it's you got to have bad guys, bad guys will save you time. I'm too much of a nice guy that I sit there going like, okay, I need to, listen to this person the entire time. I can't tell you how many times I had conversations that went extraordinarily long over a really small issue, because I like to listen to people and stuff like that. I like to make them feel like they're completely heard. People, have a lot of respect for me as a raid leader and also somebody who listens, but I'm too nice and it takes too much of my time and it's not scalable, especially when there were 40 people in the raid. It is impossible to scale. You can't do that for everybody. So you will get worn out. It will completely destroy you. You need to, for your own health and your own well-being, be a dick sometimes. And set a precedent of bad behavior or, bad behavior or being a dick doesn't get your attention, and instead it gets your dismissal. For example, if somebody cries over, this happened where somebody cried over fucking DFT and they were a good player and they left the raid and stuff like that. No conversation, nothing like that. I was just like, okay, fuck them. Like that, I don't want that type of player in my raid that's going to throw loot drama over something for somebody who like absolutely deserved this item. And they're like, I understand they might have like, because it's going to turn into a 2-hour conversation of me listening to them talk about the reasons that they deserved it, that I had already considered. And if they bring something to my attention that I hadn't considered, I have to then tell them, well, what about all these things this other person has done? What makes them have more value here than you, in my mind, is these things, right? What makes you think that you deserve it more than this person, right? And it always comes to, this or that, or like, hey, I do more damage than them, or whatever it is. But very rarely will somebody make you go, never considered that. Damn, I should have done more work. And if they are able to make you think that, then like you're probably in a bad spot as an officer. Because holy shit, if you aren't considering all those aspects of things before you hand something out, then you are doing more harm than good. So yeah, a lot of the times if somebody's throwing a fit, it's better not to have them around, unless you are doing things in a really shitty way. So
I mean, the last thing for the officer crew stuff is that recruiting. I think this is something that gets put in the back seat for a lot of guilds.
That.
Is that
that goes right in the back seat.
You need a recruiting officer. You need someone like they usually you actually just want them to be the most social person in the guild. They don't really have to be like the best player or really competent or at raid leading and these things. They just have to be someone that's on a lot and who's really social and just like likes grouping with people and hanging out and WoW. That's usually your best person for that, because their job is to spam the guild recruiting message and then talk to all the people that will ask people in your raid, hey, who'd I talk to about your guild? Like you send it to that guy, and that guy's gonna handle all of that. So recruiting is probably like the most underrated part, because if you're not constantly recruiting, your guild's going to die. Because you always want to, even when you're full, you want to have ideas of, okay, if people leave, do we have like people we could potentially talk to who might want to come join our guild? It's always good to have those people ready to step in. And that's what a good recruiting officer needs to have in the back of their like pocket.
Yeah, they have to be a recruiter, much like any other company has. Which, no offense to recruiters out there, and I mean this in the best way possible because I don't have these skills. They have to be somebody who networks. They don't necessarily have to be like good at anything else, right? Like they don't have to be a good DPSer. They don't have to do any of those things, right? They don't have to do shit. All they got to do is network well and understand the roster and the needs, right? So you need to communicate to them what you need in the roster, what you're missing, and the demand for it, and they need to go get it, right? So they don't have to be somebody who is particularly good. They don't have to be somebody who's particularly like skilled or anything like that. They just have to be good in communication, social, talk to other people, guild. They put a lot of hours in. So it might be somebody that you wouldn't suspect is like an officer, right? But it's like it's weird because like in guilds, officer like recruit is usually called like a recruiting officer, but I don't think it's really an officer position. You're literally just a recruiter, right? Like that's I think the mistake people make is they make the recruiter an officer and make them have to have some type of officer
like
skills,
say and things,
right?
yeah, in the officer meetings and
or
such
skills
and
or
all
anything
that.
like that. You just need a fucking recruiter. That's all you need, right? You just need a recruiter. So if you can get a recruiter, if you can get somebody in there who is able to do that and have that as like their title, it's just like having somebody who's like, God, it's like we have a PvP officer, right? And it's like that's not really an officer position. They're just somebody who likes to like make fucking groups and stuff. It's like, So you just need to make sure that you get somebody in there. They don't have to have officer skills. It's just like hiring somebody and being like, oh, you're the recruitment manager. It's like you don't really have to have any manager skills to do that. You don't have to have any officer skills. Just get somebody who's good at recruiting. It's an execution job, not a leadership job.
Yeah, and as far as like class leads go, they're very optional-ish. I've been in good guilds that have them and good guilds that don't have them as well. And like we said earlier, it's more important that you have someone in charge of like the tanking, the healing assignments, the caster assignments and things. They don't necessarily have to be of the same class all the time. As long as you have someone in the guild who's good at their class, preferably who like you can refer people to if they have questions about their class. But they don't necessarily have to be officers, or you don't necessarily have to appoint them as class leads or anything in that particular case. The bigger the guild though, the more they have these. Like when I was in Progress, they had class leads, but that's because like Progress had like 4 raids going. So it helped to have a class lead to coordinate all that stuff. But if you just have like 1 raid or 1.5 raids with outs, you don't really necessarily need a class lead for every single class. As long as the classes feel like they can talk to an officer, that's more important, I feel, than having necessarily a class lead.
Yeah. They have to have somebody that they have to have somebody in charge of them. You don't really have to have, like you said, everybody have a lead of some kind. So I that's definitely overkill. You need somebody who's in charge of tanks. You need somebody who's in charge of healers. Somebody who's in those assignments, and you need somebody who's in charge of casters, typically, and melee DPS. So usually lumped together. So that's like 4 leads right there, plus the raid leader, right? And another thing that I think is really big is you should have weekly meetings with all 5 or whoever they are present to do loot ahead of time. I really do think that, like, depending on your loot system, whatever it might be, even if it is DKP or anything like that, you should have weekly meetings, officer meetings about your raid, the status of your raid, what you guys want to accomplish, how to accomplish it, and then also about loot. If you have to do loot priority of like, this player is doing well, or this player's talked to me and they actually haven't gotten any gear in a long time. Because there's the things that I don't fucking track what the Shadow Priest fucking needs. Like, that's probably my least known class. I don't know shit about Shadow Priest. And then I go check the forums, and Shadow Priests don't even know fucking shit about Shadow Priests. Like, I go check Discords, and like half of them are like, Shadow Priests want 4-piece tier 5. And I'm like, really? And then others are like, no, they want to wear Frozen Shadow Weave and Spell Strike this phase. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense because it has more spell power on it. And people are like, yeah, but that crit is 20 crit is worth 1 spell power, and there's enough crit on there to like eventually make that difference up. And I'm like, okay. And then somebody's like, well, actually, your real BIS is 3 pieces of the Karazhan Shadow Weave stuff, or like Shadow Wrath pieces. I'm like, do those things even exist? I literally have not seen any of those on anybody's logs. Like actually, that is actually a real side question. Like, do those pieces of Shadow fucking Wrath even exist? Because I have literally never seen any of them. I have not seen bracers, belt, or boots. And when I look at like the top Shadow Priest log, they don't even fucking have that shit. I'm like, this is somebody who would drag 10 people to Karazhan and farm that shit for days. And you need all 3 pieces. So it doesn't matter which boss spawns every time you go in, right? Every time you go in and reset it, whatever boss spawns, if it's the boots, belt, or bracers, you're happy because you get a roll on fucking potentially having it land on shadow. But I have not seen any of those pieces. I don't even know if they fucking exist. If they do, great. But I have not seen any of those. So, and if they're still busy with this phase, I'm just surprised. Like no, like super like hardcore guild has ever like really dragged anybody to do those things for like a few hours, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. So to answer the question in chat, we are going to cover loot systems as well. That don't worry, that's on this list. We got a big list here. We got a big list of things to cover. But yeah, so yeah, that's the officer crew you need, and related to that is like just the basics of your raid, like your ideal raid comp and like your lengths and what raid days you want to do. So firstly, Zirene, what do you think is the ideal amount of raid? I'm curious to see what you think. For like, we're gonna approach this from like an average guild, like a semi-hardcore guild, not like a super hardcore guild or a casual guild. Like a guild that can be expected to clear the phase in a timely fashion without being like super hardcore.
Right now, 2 days. 2 days, 4 hours each day.
Interesting. I actually agree. Although I would put I'll put like a asterisk to the side that maybe during progression week if you can add a third day, to help with like progression and such. Because this is something I've been talking to my own guild on White Main, the one that's actually not running into any issues right now because we have really strong admin in place, has been talking because we've been doing 3 raid days of 3 hours as our standard, even though we don't use the third raid day. We've pretty much never used the third raid day unless it's progression. But we found 3 hours is a very awkward amount of time to have on one raid because one, for your flask usage, it makes it really awkward for the second flask. And then 2 is the way the raids work out is with 3 hours, a lot of the time you get to the boss, like the last boss in the instance, and then you get like one pull and they're like, oh, well, we were done for the day. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We got to come back and clear trash. So we found 3 hours is super awkward. 4 hours is what we're actually thinking about moving. We're thinking of just cutting our third raid day off and just doing 2 4-hour days. And that might just turn out better because it's just that if you get that far in the instance, you must as well finish it rather than make people come back for like a third day where they don't even use it fully. They use 2 hours of that third day. And in the end, it's less scheduling. Even though people are raiding more on those 2 days, it's less... They don't have to cut off a whole nother day. I think a lot of people prefer doing 2 days than 3 days like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think 2 days, 4 hours is like ideal for your mid-tier guild. And I think it's a good setup for almost any guild. You really do just want to use 2 flasks or 4 flasks a week, right? 2 flasks a day, 4 flasks a week. And it lines up really well. Also, if you end up doing progression, like you said, you get to bang your head against the boss for a good bit. It takes you about 2 hours to get through all the content to get to those bosses. So like one day you might clear SSC, 2 hours of Vaj. Then the next time you do like TK into 2 hours of KT. But if you end up clearing stuff and getting better and better, those 2 raid days are still good because you'll clear maybe all of SSC and some of TK. And then the next day you come in, you kill KT, and then you can go do Kroll and Mag. And keep in mind when Hyjal and BT come out, BT is kind of a long instance. And you do want to set the precedent of like 4 hours in one sitting is kind of good. So, it's like Hyjal, not particularly long or anything like that. Just some downtime in between pulls and stuff. But BT for sure is like one of the longer, if not the longest one in TBC.
This is something my guild's doing next phase. We talked about it, is that we're gonna go a little bit harder just during progression, just to inflate our guild rank a little bit. Then we immediately go back to like our 2 raid days or whatever we have scheduled, because guild rank is really important when it comes to recruiting. So that's like, I think like, 2 days is perfect, 2 4-hour days. And then you have like the asterisk that if possible, you try to do a little bit more just during progression weeks, just at the start. So you can go to get a good guild rank and get the recruiting rolling. Because,
it's a big thing where like you won't care about it, but the officers will care about it, and it does affect you.
Yeah.
So like the recruiting, having a high rank does help. And if you're a GM or a raid leader, you should definitely care about your guild's rank, because people who aren't in your guild, it's all they know about your guild. So It's the only way to get people cross server to really care about your guild. Is they'll be like, oh, I'm thinking about this server because my friend plays on it. What guild is there? And then they'll look at like number one. That's typically what people will do. So if you aren't really up there, then you won't get nearly as many eyes on you.
So here's a question. What is your ideal raid comp though for like a semi-hardcore guild? So I have the raid builder here. Well, what would you say is your ideal raid comp? That's not obviously not speed anyway. Yeah, like someone in chat saying stack warlocks. For like your average guild, where would you start? So 3 rogues, right? 3 rogues.
Yeah, three rogues. Put them in group 8. That's the crying group. So I would start with 5 shamans, no matter what.
Shamans, yeah.
Yeah. I'd start with 5 shamans.
What type?
I would have 1 Ellie, 1 enhanced, 3 resto.
Okay, so you have the 5 shamans.
All right, I kind of want to just get like the druids out of the way, so I just do 3 druids.
3 druids, 1 of each.
Yeah, 1 of each type. This is for your mid-tier guild, so it's not like anybody's going restokin or anything like that. I do your 3 pallies, 1 of each type. I would do 2 priests, a shadow, and a holy. And that should cover all of your healers, your 6 healers. Yeah. Some people like IDS, but the holy priest can do whatever they want. Because you have 3 resto druids, you don't really need circle of healing, but circle of healing is very strong. So for progression, I think it's definitely better to have that than IDS. So, either way, but that covers your 6 healers. It covers your 3 paladins, your 5 shamans. So your groups are typically fine from there. Now is where you start getting into, what are you going to do with the rest of this shit? So I definitely think you bring a prot warrior, arms warrior. You bring 2 warriors. So that covers your 3 tanks, covers your damage increase. And so you have 10 slots left, and these are divided amongst the remaining DPS classes.
Okay, now we get the 3 rogues.
Yeah. So here, I'll preface this with, you have 10 slots left. This is where you can bring pretty much whatever. I think this right here is like the base of what you should have in every raid. That you should definitely build off of this. So boomies, I think, are always worth it right now for the mid-tier guild, just because 1, it's another innervate, 2, it's another battle res, and 3, it's because the 3% hit, some people make their whole entire build around it, right? So and like on bosses, it is significant. You can have somebody go restokin, but people don't really like to do that. So I would say for like the mid-tier guild, just still bring a boomie. At the highest level, you can start having restokin stuff, right? But that's at like the highest. Because you're freeing up a DPS slot. But the boomie brings 6% crit to 4 other casters. They bring 3% hit to all of your melee and range DPS, and some people make their build around it. Hunters make their build around it sometimes, right? Because hunter hit is pretty, interesting. Yeah. Not always not always doable, and not everybody's Draenei. So, yeah. But I would say that the boomie is definitely something to bring in like a mid-tier guild. Sneaking the 1 rogue.
Yeah. Don't worry, rogues. I got you. I got the rogue in there.
But now you have 10 slots, and between these 10 slots, it's like you want to bring maybe a survival hunter, maybe 2 BM hunters. So two arcane mages, and then you want to bring an affliction warlock, and then 3 destro. This is like for like average mid-tier guild, like because you're bringing a rogue and shit. 5 healers bis. I think 6 healers is bis for your average guild. I think 5 is good for when you have like an actual like really good guild. Yeah. I think 6 is just, I think 6 is fantastic. If you can cut 1 out, then maybe it's good. You can also argue no survival. There's a survival hunter. He's in group 4 right now. But this basically just covers everything. You could cut a destro lock and add a fury warrior as well. Would be the other thing, because you could have your group be your warlock group would be your elemental shaman, your 2 warlocks, and do 2 destro and the affliction, and then the boomkin, right?
Yeah.
And that would be like your warlock group. and you would have a Fury Warrior that would be replacing one of those Warlocks. Moonkin, Ellie, 3
don't worry, guys. The obviously the groups aren't set to like what they be under raid. This is just the raid comp, overall raid comp. So yeah, I think that looks like pretty standard. Looks like pretty standard. I think my guild runs really close to this, except like you said, we actually have an arms and a Fury Warrior, and then we just cut one of the other DPS basically.
Yeah, you cut one of the DPS. Here, I think you would cut one of the Warlocks and just run 2 Destro and the Affliction, and then have the 3 Warlock group, because it just feels like shit to be the Affliction Warlock who sits in a group, and you're like, dude, I'm with the fucking Holy Priest. Like, what is this shit? you're sitting there, like, man, this group sucks ass. You're getting like no bonuses or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think that's about right. The question is, Zirene, what would you do for your bench though? What would you pick for your bench if you wanted to like have a healthy bench? Because that's the thing about like raid comps is you want to have like some sort of bench ready.
Yeah.
How many bench players would you say you would go for, and what would you ideally have on your bench?
So on my bench, I would ideally have. This is what I really think every raid should have on their bench. Minimum, you should at least have 1 Holy Paladin and 1 Resto Shaman on your bench. Like, even if it's somebody's ult, right? Because raiding without 3 Pally buffs and the 6 healers always makes the raid much harder. And raiding without 5 shamans is much harder because of DPS checks and lust and stuff like that. So I think these are probably the 2 most important characters to have on the bench at any one time. And I would even argue maybe having that be a prop paladin, because prop paladins are incredibly important. Try to do fucking Tempest Keep and SSC without a prop paladin. It's fucking borderline impossible. It is so much fucking harder. So I would even argue like that Holy should probably just be a fucking prop paladin. So I definitely think these are like the most important things to have on your bench in case of an emergency. So I think it would be like the prot pally and the resto shaman are probably the 2 most important things to have on your bench. From there, though, you want to build out your bench with characters that can sub in for roles that are very important. Like, for example, if you lose your Shadow Priest, is it the end of the world? Not really. Like, if you lose your Boomkin, is the end of the world? No, not really.
If you lose your rogue, it's the end of the world, though.
That is the end of the world. That is absolutely the end of the world. So you want to have at least 5 rogues who all are really thirsty for glaives to motivate that one rogue they'll rather always have my shaman than my pally. Yeah, but that's the thing, is because you're a helpful player who's already playing shaman. So, if you're a shaman main, just don't bother having an ult, dude. Like, they're never going to take your fucking ult. Never, ever, ever. So, yeah, it's bad. But from there, I honestly think like everything else is kind of
up to
just
you.
nice to have.
Just like an extra like caster, extra like what my guild does have is like someone said in chat, we do have like a warrior, Fury Warrior, but sometimes they can also go prot if we need like him to fill in for prot and such. So he's like just like kind of like the stand-in. And then if we have too many melee, like we swap, maybe like we have weeks where like the rogue will sit or the arms will sit, and like we can funnel him in from time to time.
Well, I would actually have the Fury Warrior instead of one of the Destro locks, like I said. Like I really think that would be ideal, right? Because it's a large DPS increase to your raid. Like, it is actually something people were talking about is you know how there's like an enhancement shaman, 3 hunter, and a feral druid group, right?
Yeah.
It's actually more DPS to have the Fury Warrior be in that group than the 3rd hunter.
Oh,
so people did the math on it, and it is more damage is a larger DPS increase to your raid to, instead of having another 3% damage increase, give the shaman give the shaman battle shout as well as all of the pets battle shout, and then also get the warrior the 6% damage increase and the 10% increased AP. So it's actually more DPS to your raid to have the Fury Warrior be in that group than the 3rd hunter. So yeah, it's actually really interesting.
How many would you say is ideal bench number? Like 3 to 5 or?
The problem with benches is like, if these aren't people's ults and stuff like that in like another raid, it's very hard to keep people on a bench and hungry. because if they're just somebody who comes in and fills, like it's very hard to keep them up to date in gear. They're always going to be a hit to your raid. So it's typically like if you have another raid or you know somebody who's like who's a good player and has like an alt, it's hard. And somebody says we just rotate people on bench. That's a good idea as well, but God, it is like really difficult to keep players interested when other people might offer them a spot. And let me tell you, it is very fucking hard to keep a resto shaman on the bench and not in somebody else's guild. So because they are by far the most sought after character in the game, at least on Alliance side. There's so fucking sought after. So
yeah, I think our
most coached class by far.
I think the way we have it is that our second rogue is also has a resto shaman that raids as well, or can raid as well. So like
you
a lot of times
your resto shaman has a rogue.
Yeah. So yeah, for a lot of boss fights, he actually does end up playing his shaman. But yeah, so he's like the resto / rogue at the same time. But I think my white man guild, I think we run 30-ish, and then we have like an extra like warlock on the bench, and like I can't remember what our other bench player is, but yeah, we have about 30. I think so. Yeah, so we have a rogue on the bench, and then we have a warlock on the bench as well. But they also play like multiple characters and such, so they can kind of fill in for multiple roles depending on what we need. But yeah, I'd say like around 30. But like someone in chat says, if you're gonna have a bench, you need to rotate them. That's one thing we're very fair about, is that if someone's like a main on the bench, we try to make sure that they don't sit more than 1 week in a row. So if they sat last week, they don't sit the next week. And what we've found, at least with bench players, is that it's quite often, usually 1 or 2 people can't make the raid anyway, so you don't have to worry about 1 to 2 slots week to week most of the time. And then with your bench players, a lot of the times you're gonna have like one guy on the raid at least who's coming from a long day at work. He's really tired. He's happy to sit. Like usually when you ask if anyone wants to sit, usually there's like one guy in the raid who's just tired and he doesn't want to raid that day or whatever, or he's got his loot already. And usually it's actually not too hard to find people to sit, as long as like they know that they're not sitting consistently. That's what we found, at least with the bench.
Yeah. People are going to be more willing to sit when they get more gear.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, oh, I don't need this anymore. Like, let me save the money on consumes this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I never go to Mag anymore. It's because I don't need any from them. When they ask for people to sit, like, yeah, sign me up. Sign me up. I don't need to go to Mag. It's fine by me.
So let's work the groups here really quickly.
Yeah, let's fix the groups, sure.
Because it does affect, like, composition overall, right? Yeah. So, like, well, we'll just finish up group 1 here. Instead of the resto, you just put the affliction warlock in there, and group 5, the destro lock. Remove the affliction warlock from group 3 into group 1 instead of the resto. Get rid of the destro in group 5 and put the fury warrior in there, just so that we have the right thing. So I don't really like the fourth warlock, and I wanted a fury in there just for like the diversity of things. Work on the 2 beast mastery hunters, the fury warrior, and the feral druid with the enhancement in group 4. So just, I guess, move the fury warrior into group 4.
Swap these again.
Yeah, move the fury warrior into group 4. Move the BM hunter into group 4, and move the feral druid in there. So BM instead of survival.
Yeah. And move the feral.
And then feral instead of the rogue. Fuck the rogue. With all due respect.
How's the rogue gonna pump, Zirene?
By rolling a different class. Like, how is the rogue gonna pump? That is Classic Fresh is coming out. God damn. Group 5 is the 2 arcane mages, the shadow priest, the resto shaman, and then I believe this is where you want to put your it's like holy priest or holy paladin in this group. I think typically the holy priest is in here, but no. Yeah, I think it's the holy priest. Yeah, the paladin is situational. I think there's like something with auras at some point. Somebody was talking to me about it where it was like, God, what fight was it? It was Lady Vaj. Lady Vaj, I like to put the holy paladin in there. because Devo Aura for multi-shot is actually good. So like your arcane mages actually can wear a little bit more DPS gear and not get multi-shot insta-killed, and not have to wear like HP gear and have like above like, the 8.5k HP if they have Devo Aura on and they stick near the pally. So it actually does help. Let's see. Fury is in a hunter group only use more DPS if you have a second enhance for melee group. Otherwise, Fury is better off in melee group if you have just one enhance. Yeah, that might be true. The Fury and hunter group is only more DPS if you have a second enhance for melee group. Otherwise, Fury is better off in the melee group if you have just one enhance. So move the Retribution Paladin in for the Resto Druid, and then move the Prot Warrior for the Protection Paladin. Yeah, swap the Prot Warrior with the BM Hunter in Group 2, and then swap the Arms Warrior in Group 2 with the Holy Paladin in Group 4. If you want 5 heals, you can just swap Group 3 Resto for Enhance. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think this is pretty good. This is a pretty decent setup. And then obviously you still have 2 more spots for like bench, but it just depends on what you guys want. It would maybe like an extra like priest or something. It just depends on who you need to fill in from time to time. Really. But yeah, I think this looks pretty solid for just like your average guild comp. So we got comp stuff figured out now. Okay, here's a question, Zirene. How many raid crews do you think is ideal? I think like right now it's just like the one raid for most raid crews, right? And then well, from what I've seen is most guilds are doing the one main raid, and then they have like an alt raid that takes up pugs and things to fill as well, like just to keep alts geared and potential class swaps and things like that in the future. At least that's the way my guild's running it. My white main guild is we have one main raid and then we have like alt raids, which also fill in with other people and such.
How many raid crews is ideal? Should you have an alt raid? Yeah, you should. You should definitely have an alt raid. It helps your bench get geared. It gives them something to do when they get benched. And it also allows people to play alts, which they probably should have, considering the content in phase 1 was pretty bad. But also it allows you to trial people as well. So I think it's good.
Yeah,
I think it's a good kind of like I don't see a lot wrong with having an alt raid. It allows people to play their character in-house. It allows you to give some place to like trial people to when people get benched, or when they when they get benched, they still have a place to like perform or prove themselves. It's also good to have for like we were talking about earlier, like when people want to like volunteer. There's an alternate raiding day if they can't like make your raid, instead of like losing raid altogether. Like let's say I have something on Friday, or like I'm not feeling well on Friday, then there's a raid that I can go to instead later in the week. So yeah.
I think I don't think it's like a must-have, but I think it's very nice to have the alt raid. You just need to have someone in charge for doing sign-ups and things like that, and managing the outs and all that. But Karazhan's really easy to out raid. Karazhan's really easy to out raid.
It will take extra time, so that's always the big thing. Is like it does always take extra time, so just be careful. Just be very careful with alt raids.
Yeah,
because people will get upset, people will get mad. It's not as good, etc. So,
yeah. So I mean, the last thing for you're setting up your raid is you have to decide how hardcore. Like, what is the minimum standard? I think is important to set the expectations for the raiders as well. Like, you have to tell them, okay, are we like a always consume guild? Like, where are consumes expected? How hardcore are we gonna be? And I think it's really important to at least tell people like, okay, you we're expecting you to always to consume on bosses, but you don't necessarily have to always have full consumes on trash if we're dying like every pull during a progression run. You might not necessarily constantly consume, but I think it's good to have the minimum standard so that because it's something like we can cover a little bit later as well, is that what like breaks up guilds sometimes is when some people are super tryhard, some people aren't, and they feel like the other people are slacking and such. So you need to like have that standard where you say, okay, as long as the people are meeting this minimum standard, they're good. You don't have to like hassle them or anything like that. And then if they want to be like Alinis and pop 1,000 gold in haste potions in that run, they're more than able to do that, but we're not gonna force everyone to do that every raid, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
God damn it. Yeah. It's a nice place to kind of chill a little bit, but still like not I mean, like it's good to kind of set expectations, I guess is what I want to say, right? Just like let everybody know kind of how people are going to play or what's the expectation is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think at this stage, the standard expectation is, I don't know any guild that doesn't have just full consumes on bosses at the least. It seems to be a standard. I don't know anyone that does no consumes on bosses. And then trash seems to be the place where people get to slack usually a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have just Discord basics. I'll just mention this. It is pretty straightforward. Just for people that want to know what you need in a Discord, it's pretty straightforward. You need obviously recruiting area. You need somewhere to make your announcements. You need to have an assignment spot where people can see like, okay, these are assignments. Usually that's in a sheet. A lot of these can be covered inside like one spreadsheet. A lot of guilds have like one spreadsheet, like Google Sheets doc or something like that. You do need an attendance and absences kind of thing so that people can, this is something that people need. You need to drill this into people that when they're not going to show up, they need to tell people ahead of time, because you do not want to go get to the raid last minute and be like, oh, these 5 people didn't show up, but now we got to like figure out the bench and do the replacements and everything. You need to get your raiders in the habit of posting out and giving like enough heads up so that whoever's in charge of rosters can handle it and fix it up before the raid actually happens. Yeah, so you want obviously a sign-up channel. What we found, my guilds used to do like separate class channels, but we found that they weren't really utilized unless you're in a mega guild like Progress or something where you have like 4 or 5 raid teams. In the smaller guilds, we found like the class channels weren't super helpful. Instead, it was just easier to have like one tanking channel, one healing channel, one caster channel, one melee DPS channel, and then that's usually where people don't really talk that much, but when they talk about it, it's usually like an upcoming loot thing where people want to see, okay, what are the classes thinking here for this piece of loot? Then at least they have somewhere where they can like talk all together, basically. And then then you don't really need this like class channel kind of thing all that much anyway. Then you have your standard logs channel, and the sheets channel. So this is like every guild I know has a sheets channel, or
where you check the.
We check your roster, your strats, like your assignments, loot prios, like you're tracking DKP, BIS list, attendance, stuff like that. It's basically just like where you put your sheets, your Google Doc sheets that everyone has. And obviously you just have officer channels where you discuss stuff and such as well. But yeah, so that's just your standard Discord basics. I think I have a screenshot here. Yeah, it's just like, this is one of my guilds. It's just like pretty standard. I think it's pretty standard Discord stuff. But I do think it's important to have like at least a decent recruiting channel, because that's the first thing a lot of guilds see is when potential recruits will see is when they join your Discord server and then they say, okay, yeah, this is the guild's Discord. The worst thing are guilds where they don't have someone doing permissions properly, and then you're trying to get into the guild and they like don't have permissions, you can't see anything. I think it's good. That's where your admin officer comes in. And takes care of that stuff. Okay, here we go. Spreadsheets and assignments. I actually just have my guild spreadsheet just to give people an example. So every guild should have these spreadsheets. Now, what you actually have on your spreadsheets is kind of like up to you.
Up to you, yeah.
It varies a lot, but I can show people an example of what this is my White Man Guild spreadsheet looks like. And I think we're one of the more organized guilds as far as spreadsheets go. So like we have our full roster listed in the spreadsheet. We have like attunes. We track all the attunes and the professions for people in the spreadsheet as well. And then we use it also to mark absences. So we say, okay, if someone marks out, we know like this person is out for this date. And then we have like sometimes we do like rough comps and things below for the next raid as well. And then usually you have an assignments page. Usually this is either part of the spreadsheets or you have this in a separate sheet somewhere, but you should have an assignments sheet or assignments thing listed somewhere so that people can check, okay, what am I assigned to? Where am I going? And this is where it goes back to you need an officer crew that has like the healer assignments, the tank assignments, and all of that. And they should be doing this every week and fixing it for all the bosses and such. So yeah, this is how my guild does it at least. Then we have, so we this is something we added this phase, is just everyone has to submit a BIS list, because here's the thing is that sometimes in the less hardcore guilds, people cannot be trusted to have intelligent BIS lists. So sometimes we found it was just easier to have everyone submit a BIS list of what they think they want. And then the officer crew can double check it and make sure they're not just like trying to do like a really weird loot combo. And then it allows the officer crew to then say like, okay, well, you want this, but this is exactly the same as this other item that drops. It doesn't make sense for you to go for this. We're going to give this to the other class instead. And then you can just pick up this other, like, you can pick up the tier chest instead. A good example of that is like the tier chest for warriors versus like the Bloodsea. It doesn't really make sense that if the warrior wants it, they can get it like after the rogues, but it doesn't make sense you give it to the warrior before when they basically get the tier for free at the same stage. Yeah. So it's things like that. That's why my guild started doing like a bis list and getting everyone to submit it. And then at least that way the classes know like what's important to the other classes as well. They can just look at it and be like, oh, okay, these guys want these items. Okay, that's okay. Then we can kind of pivot where we need to pivot.
No, I definitely think that's the right way to do it. Like having people be almost in charge of like their own loot in a sense, where they are the ones who submit it. So I completely agree.
Yeah. And then we also did we do wish lists just to see what people want as like the most important. This isn't like super important, but we track this as well just to see like what people want, what big ticket items people want, and then we cross it off our wish list once people have the items. It's just so like sometimes we want to track how many people are waiting for like a Ring of Lethality, and then we can see, okay, these people are still waiting for it, and it's just a interesting way to do it. Yeah, so it's just like an easy way to do it. And so my guild also does like it for TK. Then we also track like vortex patterns and such, like who's in for vortexes and patterns, and then we also track a guild bank. I think that might be a separate sheet depending on where it is. But yeah, so basically that's what we use the spreadsheet for at least. And someone needs to be in charge of all of this. Obviously, you can see this stuff takes a bunch of work and formatting. And you can't just you can't just like completely wing it. It does take a whole bunch of work to get right. So this is where your admin officer comes in, and he should be in charge of doing all this stuff. And this is what I'm implementing for my guild as well, is what I'll be in charge of. So what you can do as well though, in case like you didn't want to do it like this with your prio list, you actually can go into something like That's My Bis. And you can just like set prios in That's My Bis. Some guilds like using That's My Bis. It allows people to submit their bis list, like their wish list and things. That's another way to do things. But you can just use a spreadsheet as well. You don't have to get fancy with That's My Bis and have like a whole sheet like this. You can just legit just use a spreadsheet and just list it simply like this. But yeah. So for people that don't know, this is what every guild should have, is this. If you ever go to raidplan.io, so raidplan.io is basically a site that you can select TBC, then you click create raid plan. Then you can go for each encounter, basically. You can go for each encounter, like let's say you're doing like Lady Vash. It brings up a photo of Lady Vash, and then you can put assignments, right? You can put assignments, you can put arrows, like you can be like, okay, we want the tank moving this way, or you want like rotating this way. You want your rogues here, or you want your hunters in each quadrant, or whatever it is. If you're doing quadrants, like a lot of guilds do, if you have 4 hunters or 3 hunters, whatever it is. And I think everyone's used to this, right? If you raid in TBC, you understand what this is, because a lot of guilds would just post this, be like, okay, everyone check your assignments. So obviously you need someone in charge of this, right? And doing all your assignment sheets and such. You don't need them for every boss though, from what I found. You don't need them for every boss, because some bosses are like a lot more straightforward. It's just the complicated bosses I found, like Lady Vash, for example. You do need to have an assignment sheet so people know what quadrant they're assigned to. And this is where the admin officer will come in as well, because he'll have to change the assignment sheet based on the bench. Like sometimes people don't show up, you swap someone in front of the bench. Yeah. So this is basically what you do with the raid sheets. Loot systems, Zirene. We've talked about this before, like in the past, but since to keep it all in the same place here. Loot systems. Obviously everyone knows the soft res and rolling is kind of like just entry level loot system. If you're just like starting up a raid, a lot of people just do soft res to make it easy. If you join like a pug, it's usually soft res or rolls or something along those lines. Then you have to choose between like DKP slash epgp. So for people that don't know, DKP is obviously just your standard DKP point system. epgp is basically DKP with decay, from what I've gathered, is basically you add in one more step on top of the DKP. And then loot council is loot council. And then there's a whole bunch of wishlist systems. Like I know Zirene's had fun with the onslaught loot system in the past. Loads of fun doing that one.
Fun.
So in general, at least the way I look at the loot systems is that loot council, if you have a really strong officer crew who understands loot and your guild is all on the same page and they can get at least on the same page, roughly speaking, loot council tends to be the best system. But the more casual your guild, the more I think you start going towards like DKP or epgp, because it just causes less arguments with people who don't understand loot, who you don't want to leave the guild still, because in a like less hardcore guild, like only set amount of people are hardcore and understand how the loot works. So you're gonna have a lot of people who don't understand that the hardcore people are making a guild run and they deserve maybe a little bit more of the loot here. Whereas in like if you have more casuals mixed in, I've always said the hardest part of running a casual guild is that you have to balance the casual players with the hardcore players at the same time. And I found like loot council is super hard to run in those guilds. Yeah, in those guilds at some point it's just such a headache that I just prefer DKP or epgp in like the less hardcore guilds. But I think for like a good semi-hardcore guild, at least personally, I think loot council is the best system, assuming your officer crew is not corrupt and knows what they're doing. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Zirene?
I think you always want to incentivize your best players to stay. That's kind of the thing is, when you're creating a loot system, always think, who am I appealing towards? Because if you're doing soft reses and you kind of put everybody on the same page and you aren't like rewarding performance or anything like that, or attendance even, then people who attend every raid and consume every fight and are your best players, they are the people that you are not tailoring towards. You're tailoring towards the casual who's not going to consume for every fight, who has the same chance of winning an item as somebody else does. They're going to be like, oh, this was a great raid. I won DST and, you know, I didn't have to flask or anything. It's great. I'll come every week. If you want to have that type of raid, you can, but always tailor your loot system towards who you want to have in your raid. If you want to have a raid that like rewards performance and like doesn't reward people for like being fucking parse monkeys and rewards people for like doing their job correctly, and you notice that, like, go loot council, right? If you want to reward attendance because you're having attendance problems, then go go DKP, right? So I would always say, just think about what kind of raid you want to make, who you want to appeal towards, and always know that every loot system favors a certain type of player naturally, right? Like DKP favors the player who's always going to be there, right? The loot council favors the player who plays in a way that is like always going to perform. It favors the performers typically, right? Or if you run a loot council in a way where you're like, oh, we want to spread the loot out evenly, that's going to be a loot council that isn't favoring performance, but more so trying to spread the love, and then that's going to appeal more to the like medium high tier player instead of like the high tier player alone, right? And it might make the high tier player upset because they're like, oh, you know, I outperform this guy every week. Why does he get this item over me, etc.? And then you have to justify that. So just always think, when you're creating a loot system or figuring out what loot system you want to run, that it's the correct loot system for your raid or the raid that you want to have. So that's why people do loot council so much, because they get more control over it and they get to shape it a little bit more in terms of how they want to reward things, right? And they can be, it's almost like it's a thing that's kind of alive in a sense, where over time they're like, you know, we're actually going to start rewarding people more for not just being fucking parse monkeys. I don't care if you got a 100 on this fight or a 99. I care that this person is not like wiping us on our attempts or anything like that, right? And you can actually like punish people in a sense that is not, it's a tangible thing, but it's not permanent, right? So I think that it's very important to do that. That's why I personally favor loot councils, and you just have to have the right people in charge. And you also have to set the precedent and let people know in your raid, this is how the loot council is run. This is what the loot council favors, and this is what we will be rewarding, right? So that people know when they get in, because if I tell you that we're a loot council that rewards performance, I am very likely as a good player to join your raid because I have a chance at loot in the first 2 weeks if I outperform everybody. If I come in and I just shit on all of your players in a DKP system, I'm fucked, right? I'm fucked. It's not going to help me. I'm still at the back of the line. But if in a loot council system where I just absolutely just shit on everybody, I set the precedent that people should bring haste pots and stuff like that, and I change the face of the raid, right? You're more likely to be rewarded, which then people see you being rewarded, which makes them want to actually play better and stuff like that. So it's actually really interesting. So I've kind of quote unquote studied this or like looked into this a lot. But I definitely think you want to make the correct loot system for your raid, and you want to control it as much as possible to fit and tailor what you want your raid to look like.
Yeah,
because that is the biggest factor that you have control over, aside from recruiting, that helps you figure out what your raid's going to look like.
Yeah, and Zirene, if you want everyone to submit mostly the same list except for a few people, you do wishlist system, and then you have your guild break up because everyone can't agree about what's fair, because everyone who has a brain submits mostly the same list except for like 2 people maybe who for some intangible reason select different items, and then they get abused because they selected different items.
And they try to game the system because they think everybody's going to put Gressel in the top slot, so they put something else in there.
Yeah. In my opinion, the wishlist systems, they work really well. We said this before in a past podcast, is they work really well if you have like a static raid crew and you're hardcore and you're focused on just being the best guild possible in speed runs and things like that. But as soon as you're not that guild and you have turnover and you have people coming just for loot, not necessarily for the speed of the raiding, it just causes so much drama. Don't do wishlist, guys. Don't do wishlist. I've never seen a wishlist that didn't end up with so many more headaches, because I think the reason a lot of guilds do wishlists is they see it as a simple way to like assign the loot. At first, it's less work for the people involved. It's less work. You just get people to submit a wishlist and be like, okay, well, it's on your wishlist. It's really easy to do. But it just actually ends up with more drama and work down the line when it doesn't work out, because the system just is broken for a lot of guilds. It just doesn't work for a lot of situations.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all. Like, it's very, very hard to get them to line up. And even then, when somebody gets something over you and everybody has the same wish list, it's like, hey, why didn't I get this? It's on my wish list. You're ultimately playing loot council.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, every time I've ever talked about loot council, like the comments are always like saying one system's better than the other and such. At the end of the day, all of them have different flaws. In like DKP, you don't reward performance, and loot council, it's easy to get screwed up if the people in charge don't know what they're doing, or if there's favoritism or anything like that. So all the systems have their flaws, and you just as an officer, your goal is to look at it and try to reduce the flaws as much as possible. So, like for example, one of the ways with loot council that happens is as Channel pops in and it says GDKP bis. It's interesting that a man with 150,000 gold thinks GDKP is the best system.
Probably is.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Is ultimately I don't think one loot system is better than the other. I just think figure out what you want to appeal towards.
Yeah.
And then there's the best loot system for that. Right.
Yeah.
And if I want to appeal towards the whales, Yeah.
And as far as loot council goes for reducing what can go wrong there, I think a big part of that is that you'll notice in any good loot council, and me and Zirene have both mentioned this before, is that if you are under loot council, you often just give yourself less loot to avoid any implications that you're being biased towards the people under loot council. That's just what happens. If you're on office crew and you're on loot council, what happens is you just end up passing on more loot just to make sure that everyone knows you are not corrupt in any way. It is what happens. Unless you're corrupt, then you just assign yourself everything and you run into that.
You kind of know what ultimate items you want or are going for, so you pass on other things that you think would be an equal weight. For example, if I know I'm getting glaives and I'm on loot council, I'm more likely to just pass on a bunch of other shit, so to justify myself getting glaives later, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the person who's like, not on loot council who passes a bunch of things thinking that they're going to get glaives, right? It's like, they don't know that they're not getting them. And it's like,
Okay, that's a good thing to point out actually, as well as that is a lot of guilds that run into issues with loot, they kind of kick the can down the road instead of just addressing a lot of the things straight up. Like for example, warglaives is a big one right now. I know guilds that still haven't decided what to do with their warglaives and such, and you need to decide that now because you're just causing more drama and more issues down the line if you just don't decide like right now. Because you have players who are probably raiding on the expectation of glaives or like trying to compete for the glaives. They want to know where they stand. And if you, for example, you're in a guild that has no chance of giving the warglaives to the warriors, for example, you need to let them know like right now that they don't have a chance of the warglaives if they're not going to the warriors. And you don't want to, like, the last thing you want is to have like a toxic environment where I know one of the people in my Discord, he's a rogue. They said that, look, it's going to go to like either the rogue or the warrior. And they haven't like really clarified because that doesn't tell them anything. They already knew it was going to the rogue or the warrior. And now they have this situation where he's just every week, like him and the warrior just going back and forth and trying to find faults in each other's performance. And it's just making like a really toxic environment where they're both like constantly saying, oh, I saw that guy stay in on that boss. He's trying to be a past hero and sacrificing the raid performance there. And it's just like a toxic environment. If you don't address those things like straight off the bat, you don't want that stuff to happen. But I would say that like the most important thing out of all of this is no matter which system you pick for loot, you have to do class prios, like intelligent prios on top of it. You don't want to do just DKP and just have like, okay, well, anything's open, boys. If you save your DKP, you can be a priest with warglaives if you really want to. You basically, you really, I would highly recommend, no matter what system you have, whether it's loot council, if you hate yourself and you choose wishlist, if you do DKP, you have to go into either like That's My Bis, which I showed you before, and do like a loot prio, or you have to make a spreadsheet where you show like people see what they want, and then you have like the next big ticket items assigned and such. Like you can't not have a prio. Every single guild I've seen that has broken up over loot issues, a lot of the times it's because they didn't have class prios and they have like the wrong classes fighting over stuff that they shouldn't be fighting over. Is basically what happens. And then like people get angry, like the wrong class gets the item, and then all the people in the other class get angry, and now they're thinking whether they want to stay on the guild because now they're kind of angry, and it shows incompetence on the officer crew when that stuff happens. So you definitely do not want to run a guild without loot priors. I was in a guild that did that in the first phase of Classic, and they very quickly found out that even though the officer crew said it's just fancy internet points and no one really actually cares, people care at the end of the day. Like we will care, and there's
no way.
There's a reason the guild imploded by phase 2. You have to have loot priors, at least intelligent loot priors for the items. So just to give an example, it'd be like if you go on like That's My Bis, you want to go to like the shoulder pads of the stranger, and you'd want to say like, okay, this is gonna go to your enhanced and warriors, our first prio on this. The rogues probably shouldn't take this because they have the alternative of the chest, which makes more sense. So you would assign like, you'd go like enhanced shaman first prio, and then fury warrior first prio, right? You kind of have that like that. So you just, whatever system you pick, please do this so that your guild doesn't implode. Yeah.
Completely agree. I definitely think like visibility is very, very, very important, and like people are gonna feel deceived unless you're really upfront about things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good to, if you guys aren't already, it's good to track loot as well, to have a list somewhere so people can go back and see. Usually it's on the spreadsheet. At least that's how my guilds have done it. Is you track who's gotten loot and when and such. But yeah, okay. So raid leading. This is more Zirene's thing, but we can start off with, I will say the first thing I will say is, guys, you need to set a start raid time and have bench players ready to go if people don't show up, because this is a thing that happens a lot in the less organized guilds, is that they show up for raid time like 7 p.m. and they don't start until like 7:45 because people just don't show up. they're not parked outside the instance, or they're logging in on time, but they're in like chat ref on the other side of the map, and people are already waiting for them, and they're asking for a summon suddenly. Like you have to like this is why like I usually track attendance, not usually because it matters if your raid is consistent, but usually just so you can be like, hey man, you've been late for like the last 5 raids and made the raid have to wait 15 minutes for you every time. You can't keep that up. We're gonna bench you and swap someone else in if you keep that up. So
ask them if it's gonna keep being a problem, and like, you know, hold them accountable, and also like if you have a system that can not necessarily punish, but you know, reward other people more so because of that, then it's good, right? Like, it's like DKP is always like a good one to get people to show up on time, etc., and be there for boss kills. Even though I don't like DKP as a system personally, it makes it so like they will see other people being rewarded for being on time and, you know, being there ready to go, killing a boss, etc. And like you said, having people on the bench is very, very important. If you actually have the power, like as a raid leader, if you have the power to replace someone, it is very powerful. Instead of just, we're going to wait for this person, which I have to do that currently in one of the raids that I joined, that I'm a trial in that guild, but I'm the raid leader. So it's like, I just sit there twiddling my thumbs, and then the person who's actually in charge of rosters like pings people and tries to get somebody else online until somebody else like shows up. So it's a very shit situation to be in. You don't also put any, not fear into people, but you don't make people realize there are consequences for being late. They're late, they show up, they get their spot, right? They made people wait. Cool. They wasted people's time. Instead, it's like, if you can actually get somebody in and take that spot, then that person logs on, they don't have a spot, then it's like, oh shit, you know, maybe they need to at least be communicative. Because if somebody tells you that they're at least going to be late by X amount of time, and they give you like a day's advance or whatever, and then they know like maybe they will be late, or they have to like drive home, or they got called in to work or something, as long as they give you a decent amount of like headway, right? So you can work with that. It's much easier to work with that than it is to, you know, not know where somebody is, not know if they're coming. That fucking sucks. And don't be that raider, please.
I will say though, like some raids do have the people that you know, they barely make it back in time for the raid. Like they rush home from work and they get home just on time when the raid starts. That's actually perfectly okay. You just have to kind of tell them like, look, just park your character outside the instance then, so that the raid doesn't have to wait for you if you're gonna show up exactly on time for the raid. That's a good way to do it. As we told those people to just park outside, so we're not waiting for you every week. But yeah, Zirene, so tell us, how do you lead a raid? Like, what is? Take me through the step-by-step process, I guess, or what happens when you're leading a raid, or how do you actually run a raid effectively?
So, in my opinion, running a raid, you really want to make it as foolproof as possible. Because you guys are in Twitch chat, you know each other. You guys are fucking idiots, right? Not you, but the other person in Twitch chat. Not you, but the other person. You know, person next to you. That person's an idiot. Imagine trying to raid lead that person. Not you, the other person. Just saying. So definitely not talking about each and every one of you. It's the other person. So when you're leading people like that, you need to make sure that you are stressing things and reminding them so that they don't have to think. If you get people to remember certain things are happening in the fight, watch for this, and in real time, you can update them and say, okay, watch for this, get a freedom, etc. Like you can actually call things out and get assignments. Obviously, you don't want like, and this is a little bit of a meme, but the bystander effect to come in. You want to assign people as quickly as possible to do things in your mind and have an idea of how you want the fight to play out. That's one of the biggest things is in your mind, have an idea of how the fight is going to play out, but don't make it a super solid, like has to happen this way, because that'll make you frustrated. Instead, think very fluidly about, you know, this is what the fight should look like. This is what I'm going to call for. If this isn't happening, what's going to happen instead, right? Like there's times on Hydros where it's like, okay, this guy's going to pick it up. Okay, he's dead. Let's get AoE fears. Let's get banishes, right? Let's get a banish. Okay, that one that's going away. Can this warlock banish that? Your DPS doesn't matter at that point or whatever you're doing. Instead, you want to call people to banish certain things or fear things. Say, you know, Shadow Priest go AoE fear, you need to be a little flexible because and like don't panic in those situations. That's one of the biggest things too. Just have an idea, premeditate what it should look like, and if things go wrong, just know that you have a way to deal with it in the moment, or just calmly say, okay, this is a wipe, right? Let's die in a place that's good to, that we're resible in. Do we have wipe protection, right? Just keep it all completely under control. The times that you should lose your cool are only times where there's something egregious happening. Somebody is, ruining conversation, flooding comms, talking over you, adding irrelevant information, fighting, those types of things. You want to keep a ship that's kind of, kind of a tight ship, right? You want to make sure that the shit's not going off the rails. So I definitely recommend that you, for raid leading, hold people's hands as much as possible. Like for Mag Theridon, I think this is probably one of the first forays for a lot of people into raid leading, was they're like, okay, check the sheet. Here's your assignment. And then people will fuck up the clicks, right? Yeah. I don't think there's been a time that I have raid led and I have had the clicks fuck up when I say, okay, when I say it like 30 seconds before the clicks are coming out, I'm like, okay, group 1 is up for clicks. That's Snowy, Zirene, Garchomp, Shami Milkers, and Maltese. If you have any questions about which one you're on, let me know, right? And you have the list open on your other monitor. And everybody, I have not had a click get fucked up at all when I do that. And times that I trust my raid, times that I fucking trust my raid and say, they know the sheet. They're looking at the sheet. They know. Right? And you're like, okay, group 1, get ready to click. Okay, group 1, click. Who's not clicking? Who's not clicking? And then it's like, okay, well, I guess we fucking wipe. That type of thing is not good, right? You typically want to just hold their hand as much as possible, but also give them an opportunity to inject their own information. Like I said, if anybody has any questions about their assignment, please let me know or say something, right? Because if somebody says, hey, I'm dead, or I, can't reach it or whatever, somebody else is on standby near it, and then they can call out which one they are, and then you can look at it and be like, okay, if this person doesn't know what square is, you go, square's the front left, right? You have a lot of time. Give yourself ample amount of time before mechanics happen if people have anything they want to ask in the middle of the fucking fight, right? But always keep your cool. Always handhold as much as fucking possible. I know. 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks down the line, calling Mag Theridon fucking cube clicks is repetitive as shit, but it makes it very fucking smooth. I have even neglected my own advice here, and I've trusted my raid, but it's the worst thing you could possibly ever do as a raid leader, because why the fuck would you be a raid leader if you trusted your raid? So do it for them. Play the game for them as much as you possibly can. I know it's weird to be like, how am I supposed to play the game while I play it for all these other people? Well, the answer is you're not. So they aren't playing their characters. You have to play it for them, right? Make it as easy as possible for them. They're going to focus on their DPS, and you need to focus on the mechanics so that they don't have to. And that is my biggest piece of advice there when it comes to raid leading is hand-holding may seem tedious, but there will always be a time, even your best player at some point in the raid, throughout the raid's lifetime, will be very thankful that you called a mechanic that they, for some reason, were just having an off day. It skipped their mind, and then you snap them into it by calling their name and saying, this person is up next, right? Maybe they were focused on a potion cooldown. Maybe they fucked up a dark rune. Maybe they were just worried about something else, right? As long as you can keep people focused on the things that are important in the fight and they can micromanage themselves and you can macro manage them, then it is so much more helpful, right? Even things like interrupts on Kael'thas, right? Saying, I have first interrupt, who has next, right? And somebody says, I do, or two people say, I do. You say, okay, you say, Fires, you have next one. Snowy, you have the one after, right? Just focus on those types of things in the fight more so than your own personal DPS or anything like that. That is way more important than what that you care about the fight going smoothly. They care about executing, right? That's kind of the big thing. And that's my advice when it comes to like raid leading in fights in particular.
One thing I've noticed as well with like the good raid leads, I don't know if you do this as well, but my previous good raid leads have always done they meet with the people doing the tanking and healing assignments before the raid, just to make sure like all the tank and healing and caster assignments and such are set up before they start the raid. Versus a lot of times when the raid is more running by the seat of their pants, they kind of just turn up and start calling things, and it turns out, oh wait, the tanks aren't assigned properly and the healers aren't set up and such.
Yeah, I have to do that right now in one of my raids because it's a revolving door of talent, and the assignment sheet can never actually be accurate. So we just don't fuck with it right now. It's kind of just like, I'm like, okay, I'm like, hey, Allura, you are square polymorph today, and Insulin, you are moon for the entire day, right? Those are your assignments. So every pack, I'm just going to say, okay, these are marked. I'm on Skull, Catbear is on X, Insulin, remember you are sheeping moon, and Allura is square, whatever, right? And even if you flip it or you forget or something like that, at least you called right there and say, don't listen to what I said before, just listen to what I say in the moment, right? Because everything I say before the pack might slow us down a little bit, but not having the sheet and having a revolving door of talent is just bad in general, and you're making the best of a bad situation. So yeah, it's like, what can you do?
I would say assignments on trash is actually kind of important in this
People don't look at that shit, though.
People don't
look at that.
Yeah.
People don't look at that shit.
Oh man, I feel like that's why everyone zones into TK that first time and just wipes horribly until they understand, like, oh wait, yeah, this first trash before Allah, you actually kind of have to kind of pay attention to what you're supposed to be doing there.
No, you don't. It's okay. You can wipe over and over again. It's fine. Fucking hate that shit.
Here's a question, Zirene. Do you use any raid lead tools though? Like, what do you use?
So I actually don't use any raid leading tools personally. I know a lot of people like a lot of those raid tools that will have like things that get like that put stuff on other people's screens or notes or anything like that. I know they're very helpful. I just don't use them. It's not my style or something that I have found helpful. Because I'm usually pretty good about paying attention to those things in general, and I use basically what I have resource-wise on my other monitor, and I'll just say it vocally. Now, if you have people in your raid who aren't always paying attention to Discord, it might be good to have something like that. But I just haven't had to have, people like that in a raid that I'm, doing. So,
do you have like one of those auto assignments or auto mark things? I know some people use them.
We use an auto marker right now, at least in Rain, because we used it in all of Nax, and I used it in Nax and like AQ and stuff like that in all of my raids. Because it made things much quicker. Right now, I don't use it in a few. I don't use it in one of my raids. I don't use it in two of my raids, and then the other two, they have the hunter do it. So it's a lot of stress off my shoulders, but also you just have to kind of get the assignments figured out ahead of time. Especially right now, TK, there's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to trash, right? And you don't know if you're sheeping one thing or two things, depending on if you have mages. So if you have two mages or not. So it does. I definitely think it's helpful, and I definitely recommend an auto marker. There's an auto marking weak aura that helps you just mark things very quickly as long as you set it up and put in some work ahead of time. Yeah. So I definitely recommend that. That if you consider that a raid leading tool, then yeah, I do use that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll have a list, by the way, guys, because of all the basic stuff that most people use once I format this a little bit better. But yeah, from what I've seen, most people, the most they use, if they have a special raid frame, they might have like caster mana. I've seen a lot of the raid leads have like a caster mana weak aura that they like to have, just so you can like an easier percentage based thing that shows all their main casters that they're trying to monitor for their mana levels and such.
People use like the levels on the side, the mana of their entire group on the side. They also have one that monitors cooldowns of like battle reses, lusts, things like that. My screen, I haven't been able to make room for it. I like that. I like that weak aura though, that like tells you basically everybody's cooldowns that are available, so you can see who has rebirth, and you can call for a specific person to use rebirth. But yeah, I haven't been able to use that yet. Just because I haven't found room for it in my UI, because it's just too many bars and shit like that at the same time.
It's because your weak auras are like boomer size. I've seen your weak auras, Zirene. Like you just have like the giant weak auras that pop up on your screen.
Yeah. Well, also like Pally Power is kind of invasive, so when I'm on my Paladin, it's just like Pally Power is another fucking thing I have to have like complete access to. I use full raid frame so I can see everybody at all times and stuff. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of shit. I definitely should play with a smaller UI scale. I know that for a fact. I don't know why I didn't set that up at the very beginning when I first started playing. But now if I move it, it just fucks everything. So I'm kind of
Yeah, once
fucked.
you get used to that, it's kind of like annoying just moving everything again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's definitely a quality of life improvement if you can actually lower your UI scale and move things around. It's much better.
All right. Yeah, so I guess that's the raid leading portion. So to wrap up, I thought we covered the things that make guilds fail. In particular. So first thing is like lack of prep and lack of next phase prep in particular. People really underestimate how important it is to get a good start to each phase. Because what happens a lot is if combined with a bunch of other issues, like maybe you're not keeping up with your recruiting or other things like that, if you do not do well at the start of a new phase, that's when you're going to get your people poached. And that's when you're going to have your best players be like, ah, man, this other guild cleared in by like day 5 or whatever, and we're on week 4 and we haven't even done this boss yet. That's when they're going to start getting dissatisfied and start looking at alternative options. And that's when a good recruiter on the other raid teams is probably whispering them and being like, hey, man, you seen our time? We beat everything in 3 days here. You can come over here. So like lack of fight prep is one of those things where it's on the entire officer team and in particular like the raid lead team to organize people to be aware like, okay, these are the strats we need to have in place. I don't know how have you done it for your guilds prepping for the next phase, Zirene, typically?
Well, typically it's going to involve
PTR.
Yeah, PTR. Yeah, PTR helps people not have to burn through too many consumables when you reach live. If people actually show up for it, you become more familiar. Your raid leaders get to know the fights a little bit better and be more versed in it when you get to live. So PTRing is a very valuable tool for keeping a guild together. Despite it being extra raid time, even if you're somebody who wants to go pug on a PTR, as a raid leader, you definitely should. And you should be the most informed person on a fight going into it. If you aren't the most informed person in the raid on a fight, people will tell you how to do the fight better. And mid raid, if you guys wipe on something, and that's not a good look. Where people are like, "Oh, we should probably have this happen," or, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is better for this person to do, or things like that. Those are like the worst conversations you could possibly have in the middle of a raid after a wipe. Instead of saying this is how we're going to change it, right? And just keeping control.
Yeah.
So you definitely should be the most knowledgeable person on a fight going into it. If you aren't, then you need to prep yourself better. But like you said, PTR, VODs, streams, going into Snowme's stream and asking him what he does, or that is great resource. Hey, twitch.tv/SNOMIE. Snowme. Also, it's a Patreon. So there's things like that I think resources that people don't typically use as much as they should. But also prep in terms of figuring out who's going to get loot, like you said, being understanding as an officer of like what needs to happen in your raid, who should be doing what, because you're going to get questions of like, what profession should I go, or why is this item going to this person when it helps me in this way. So just being as well versed as possible as you can be in as many things as you can be. So I would just definitely say streamers are a good resource, and no meme here. Streamers are a really good resource, or at least good players of the game are a good resource. As well as VODs and PTR and just the personal experience. So it's a lot of things that I don't think is like, it's not a mystery, right? There are resources that are all out there. There's no like big trick to it, but just prepare yourself as much as possible, right? If you're not preparing yourself as much as possible, and you're setting yourself up to fail. And it's kind of like, the way I like to think of it is, if you are trying to set your guild up to be successful, you need to prep yourself and lose sleep so that they don't have to.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest thing. And you need to get frustrated about certain things so that they aren't. So you getting frustrated on PTR is saving them frustration in the future with wiping on like live. So yeah. So stress yourself out so that they don't have to.
To give an example of, for example, like what our admin officer does in my white main guild is like, as the next phase is coming up, he's already prepping, like he makes sure he has an idea of what every class wants as far as BIS list. So he'll start messaging whoever he thinks is the most competent person for each class, and then you'll be like, okay, what do you guys want from next phase? What's your biz list look like? So he at least has an idea going into next phase to build up the loot assignments and things, and then he'll start scheduling like PTR time for people that want it. I know a lot of people don't like doing PTR, especially as you get into the less hardcore guilds. But what you can usually do is, even if it's not an official day, you can have an unofficial raid day. And usually the way PTR works is if you do it really early on when the raid gets introduced, you can just get pugs to fill in, because a lot of people hop on PTR and they want to do the raids. You don't have to have your whole raid crew show up. As long as you have like a few essential people who show up, like the officer crew or the people doing the assignments and such, who can at least they can see the fight and be able to direct people later. At least that gets your guild way ahead of the curve, as long as you can get those people. Because the thing is, you don't need your entire guild to be hardcore to be a good semi-hardcore guild, but if you have the right people who are hardcore players, who take the brunt of having to do the PTR work, having to do all the research for the other players so they can be more casual, that works out as well. And with my semi-hardcore guild at least, we literally only did, I think, 2 weeks of PTR, something like that, and we only used like the third optional raid day that we barely used before to do it, and we didn't even full clear SSC. But just having that advantage where we cleared up to Vash on PTR in that particular guild gave us such a head start on the first week that we were like, I think in 6 hours we were 8 out of 10, which is pretty good for like not a hardcore guild to be like 6 hours into launch, and we were 8 out of 10 already. So like just having that as the advantage, and it's something even to consider if you want to improve your guild rank, is for next phase, this is what my guild is planning, is we're going to do a little bit more PTR, just so that we can, like I said, you get that good guild rank, then you can recruit people, and you can be like, oh yeah, look at us on the server rank. We're a semi-hardcore guild, but we got look how high we rank considering the time that we raid. It's really good for recruiting to be able to point stuff out like that to recruits. So yeah, just prepping. So basically the admin guy or whoever's like in charge of prepping for the next phase is going to be your most busy guy a lot of the times in the guild leading up to that next phase, because he's got so much work. He's messaging everyone, making sure everyone knows the strats. It's also his job to find like an acceptable strategy that everyone can understand and then distribute to the guild somehow, whether it's sending them to the video to watch or what my guilds have done in the past is they've sometimes even logged into retail, and even though it's not exactly the same, they'll have someone stream it over Discord and have everyone at least watch, and then he'll run you through the fight over Discord, and on a retail character is not going to die in an old encounter and such, and it basically just gets people familiarized if they didn't attend PTR or whatever, so that at least they can kind of show up and ask questions. Basically, we always, that's what we've always done. We've always had a question and answer session before the start of each phase, so that people can ask like, what do I have to do on this fight? What's the deal with this? Because then it leads to a lot less wipes on like hydros, because people are trying to DPS at the swap. Yeah, things like that.
Also prepping like who's getting, resist gear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. For example, like Solarian right now, if you're doing the cheese arcane strat, yeah, prepping the gear ahead of time is huge as well. You want people in charge of that. But yeah, so I mean, the next one is something I've mentioned throughout the entire thing. We both mentioned is like, you got to be constantly recruiting. No matter what, your guild should never stop recruiting. You should always be looking to look for exceptional players. Even if you're full, you should be looking for potential bench players or people who can help fill, or talking to other people. The moment you stop recruiting is the moment you become the guild that can't recruit, and you get absorbed by the other guild once you can't fill in your spots. Because that's what happens is at some point every raid in WoW is going to hit this point at some point in time where they don't have enough people, and your only option is a merge. And you would rather be the guy accepting the merging people than the raid that's merging into the other guild, and you're losing like half your raid spots because they don't have enough spots for you guys. So yeah, always be recruiting. I think that goes without saying. Here's one as well. Here's an interesting one, is that no guild help. I put this down as you want like the really like the baitiys of the of the guild who are always willing to help people attune, always help people catch up on their raid outs, get new members quested, gear,
Yep.
and it really helps if that person also is knows a tank or is a tank and or healer, because it's those guys that really keep your guild together. Because otherwise, if you have a whole guild of just raid loggers, sometimes it's really hard to accomplish things. People need help like on the out. People need help like, oh, this guy just joined. He needs to finish this last stuff in his attunement and things like that. We have a Discord channel in my guilds usually where we use it to allow people to find like to ask for help, and then the guild can see, okay, this guy needs help. We're gonna usually it's an officer. You want an officer or someone like you. Usually it's the recruiting officer actually, because they're the social one, who's going to step up and be like, okay, let's get this guy let's get this guy sorted. So we're gonna he'll message some healers, he'll message the tanks and be like, okay, let's log in at this time and get this guy sorted. We can get his attunement done. So that's really important to have those people who help push the guild forward and help get things done. Because if you don't have that, then what happens is people like shout into nothing, into the wind, and they're like, hey guys, I need help with this, and they just get no response, and then they just feel sad and they just leave the guild eventually.
Crickets, bro.
Yeah.
Hate that shit. Oh no, man. That is actually always the worst. I really hate when that happens, but
yeah, so it helps to have that officers that's on top of it. And this next one is an interesting one. I'm sure everyone's experienced this, is the class versus class warfare. And this is why it's so important to have prior lists. I said
versus everyone? No.
it's so important to have the prior list because it helps to avoid a lot of this stuff. Just being direct with where your loot's going and telling people like what's going on. The last thing you want is the classes to start fighting against each other, being like, oh, the warriors are taking this, and then your rogues suddenly hate them. And that's actually why one of my guilds stopped using class channels, and instead of a class channel, we have a melee DPS channel. Because we found like what was happening a lot of the cases in the class channels is like they would talk about loot not including the other classes, and then like you wouldn't really have a discussion. It'd just be like the rogues are deciding the rogues should get this, and the warriors are deciding the warriors should get this. And if there's no communication there, you just end up with the classes fighting against each other, being like, wait, why do the rogues get this? That's not fair. Like we should have input on this. And yeah, you really want to avoid like the classes fighting against each other. And in the same way, you want to avoid your players fighting against each other if able. You want to have like open communication. And if that starts happening, I think you got to like step in and be like, hey guys, okay, we're going to have a big meeting. You melee or whatever are going to sit there. We're going to go in Discord. We're going to talk about it until you guys stop being aggro at each other.
Nah, let them fight.
Yeah. But yeah, it happens over the dumbest things as well. Like personal experience was with my guild in AQ, for example. Some of the rogues just hadn't gotten loot in ages because we had really bad AQ loot luck. And like at one point they were fighting over who gets the next set of tier. And if you guys know AQ in Classic, you literally get a full set of tier every week. It's not even like something that doesn't drop. So they literally started fighting over like, oh man, it's not fair that the warriors get the tier 1 week early. We should get that next set of tier. And at some point I was like, come on guys, please. Does it really matter that much? It's like 1 week. It's guaranteed 100% drop rate. We're all going to get this. It's fine. And that was just a result of just poor communication, right? It's just that the classes weren't communicating and they were getting angry about the loot allocations and things like that. So yeah, definitely want to avoid that. And that's kind of like these next 2 points. Yeah. Yeah. And so the next one I want to mention is sudden officer retirements. And this is probably what's actually impacting a lot of guilds right now. Is like office crew is burnt out, they're tired, or they quit, or they're going to play New World or Final Fantasy or whatever it is. And instead of being the nice officer that gives a heads up, they just like outright quit. And hopefully you don't have officers to do that. But the obviously the best course of action, if you're an officer and you're feeling burnt out, you got to tell people, and you got to have people willing to step up and fill your role rather than just outright quitting and leaving this vacuum. And then if no one kind of steps in, it can lead to just this like it's like kind of like Zirene said, that's why you don't want one person in charge of everything, because if they disappear one day, you don't want to be like screwed. basically. That's why it's common for most guilds to have more than one person that can raid lead, even though one person normally raid leads. You usually have like someone else who can step in and fill in if that person's like not there. You basically just don't want to have that vacuum happen. And yeah, I mean, I know there's not a lot that most people can do about this, but if you're on the officer crew, you just got to be a good officer and give people a heads up if you're feeling burnt out, so that at least they can prep and replace you before the next raid happens. And you're just not like sitting there in the next raid being like, oh, where's this guy? Hasn't logged in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, this actually happened all the time in EverQuest. This was like a common thing in so many times in my guilds in EverQuest. We're like, wait, our main tank hasn't logged in since like Monday. Has anyone heard from him? He just doesn't say anything. And people do this all the time. They just like one day, I don't know what it is about MMOs, but it's like a flip switches in, like something switches in your head, and they're just like, I don't want to log in anymore. I'm done.
You gotta go cold turkey. If you fucking log in, you're done, man. But like that's the thing is like, at least respond on Discord and tell people you're quitting. Just fucking can't tell you how many times people have just like left Discord, no conversation. They're just gone. They don't play the game anymore. Like,
yeah,
it's like, I'm not going to try to rope you back into the game. I'm just going to be like, all right, have a good time, man. Like, just let me know so I don't hold your spot or like, have an expectation. So yeah, it's always a little bit shitty. Always a little shitty.
Yeah, when people, I mean, that's what happened with my Felina guild right now, is that one of the officers just like, one day he was like, I'm not feeling it, guys, I'm done. And they're like, legit, there was no backup plan in place. That's why like our current raid lead suddenly became the raid lead, the loot lead, the everything lead, and like he's getting overwhelmed. That's why I have to step up now and try to help him out.
You're an officer.
Yeah, that's why now I'm an officer. Yeah.
It all makes sense.
I couldn't dodge a responsibility any longer, unfortunately. But yeah. So and then the final thing is just unequal raider effort is that you got to call it out if people are just not putting in the effort, like people aren't consuming that, like that's usually what breeds animosity. And I've had it happen in the past where people have said like, oh, it's fine if this guy's not trying hard, it's fine, like no one's actually complaining about it, but people are often complaining about it, or if they're not complaining about it, they're doing it in their head. Or later they're doing it in tells to like other people and such, and they're bad-mouthing them behind the scenes. And you really have to stamp that out, because it's why I'm always very harsh on rogues who come up to me and they're like, oh, we don't have to play like this min-max back. We can go as mutilate on the raid, and it's fine. No one ever like argues. We're not super hardcore. And the problem is when other people look at that guy who's underperforming and not putting in the same effort as everyone else, they start to hold resentment, and then they start to like, when that person gets a big piece of loot, they start thinking like, oh, why is that guy getting that piece of loot? He's been slacking. He hasn't even been like full consuming, and it doesn't feel fair, right? So it's really something to pay attention to, is that even when people aren't vocal about these things, they still think them. They may not just necessarily, they may not be saying it over Discord, but people recognize when someone is slacking and not putting in the same effort and getting rewarded is what happens.
Let's see. I talked about this a little bit earlier with like, how loot councils can help with that, but loot councils can't see everything, right? You won't see every single like piece of effort somebody puts in, or every time they didn't consume, right? You won't be able to catch that. Yeah. So they'll be like, oh, why is this person getting a piece of loot? And you have like no idea, because you focus on a lot of other different things. So.
Yeah, so that's just guild expectations. It's good to keep everyone on the same page, keep them in line so they don't slack. But yeah, that's why it's good to have someone who likes to look at logs as well. Usually that you can't hide from the logs if someone's actually slacking. But yeah, I think that's pretty comprehensive. We covered a lot of stuff today as far as like how to run a guild that doesn't suck. Was there anything I missed, do you think, Zirene, or?
No rogues.
No.
The guild's supposed to not suck, That was the goal, right?
Oh, it can suck a little bit. I changed that.
It can suck a little bit.
It can suck a little bit. How to run a guild that only sucks a little bit.
Yeah, okay. That's not as good of a title though for a YouTube video, How to run a guild that only sucks a little bit.
But yeah, for people that want, I'm gonna make this into like a more organized resource. This was mostly just like a list of stuff for us to cover
Yep.
for the podcast, but I'm gonna turn this into a more organized resource. Maybe like get some spreadsheets, like templates figured out for people as well, maybe if I have time. But yeah, it'll be all on the website and such. Yeah, I think that about does it for us. We've been talking for like 3 hours. We covered everything I think we can cover there, and I know Zirene's got to raid in a little bit as well.
Yeah, my fives team tried to queue fives. They were pinging me a bunch, and so I got in the fives lobby, and then I was like, "There's literally going to be nobody here." So like, we're all in a fives group, and I was like, "I'm literally just paying attention to you this whole time." And then I just see they go like, "Okay, how's everybody for 10 p.m.?" Because the queues are we're a 2K rated fives team with like a 2200 MMR, and they literally will not pair you with anybody. So like they were in queue for like 20 minutes, and they were just like, "Okay, how about 10 p.m. tonight? 10 p.m. tonight? 10 p.m." Yeah, because there's no time. You cannot queue before the evening. If you want to do
man,
fives.
it's even the popular queues you can't queue outside of a set hour. I did yesterday I did twos with not yesterday, the day before with my lock partner Reality, and there was one team queuing. And as a rogue luck, we did not want to queue in them, but they were rogue priest, like our hard counter alliance rogue priest.
Ooh.
So it was like we were just I want to play the game, but I don't want to queue right now. But we played the game. We lost a good 50 rating. Fun times queuing to Rogue Priest over and over and over again. But yeah, that's just the way the PvP scene is right now, man. Like it's rough outside of certain hours. Even in the twos bracket, is just it gets rough into the AM.
Yeah, it feels like it's like I don't know, just bad times, man.
Yeah.
Like you got to just queue. You got to queue at very specific times. That's why they're like, okay, what time we meeting up? And then with fives, oh god,
You gotta do it on the Monday, man. You gotta do it on Monday when everyone's trying to hit your cap.
That's normally when we do it.
Yeah,
but they're trying to push a little rating here, get some more extra points. That's all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, guys. So this has been episode 28. How to run a guild that doesn't suck or sucks a little bit because they have a rogue, but that's okay.
Yes, exactly. We are accounting for the normal suckage.
Yeah.
The rogue suckage has been factored into the equation already.
All right. Take care, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. See you guys.